We're going to call the meeting to order Tuesday, February 21st. And I guess we're going to start with the roll call.
So I'm going to do a roll call based off of last commissioners that are still here, and that would be Commissioner Natalie Smith. Here. Commissioner Malachi.
Here.
Commissioner Poole. Commissioner Roulette.
Here. And let's do the flag salute.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay.
So we're going to go ahead and do the oath of office for the ones who are here, and we'll try it and do the rest of them when they can get here if we can.
Okay, so Malachi and Dennis, we can do swearing in this evening. Patrick Smith is on vacation and excused, and I'm going to call Libby as soon as we're done here to see if she's coming. So
I just sent her a text message.
Okay, so if both of you want to come.
I was thinking you'd want to be there in front of her camera.
Film at 11.
I don't know where she wants.
You do have the cred.
Yep.
Okay. Okay, what I'd like you to do is both of you raise your right hand and repeat after me. I state your name. Do solemnly swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States
That I will support the Constitution of the United States
and of the State of Oregon
and of the State of Oregon
and the Charter and Municipal Code of the City of Gladstone,
and the Charter and Municipal Code of the City of Gladstone,
and that I will,
and that I will,
to the best of my ability,
to the best of my ability,
perform the duties of Planning Commissioner
perform the duties of Planning Commissioner
for the City of Gladstone, Oregon,
in the City of Gladstone, Oregon,
during my entire term of office,
during my entire term of office,
so help me God.
so help me God.
Yay! Woohoo!
Congratulations. Libby just parked. She's going to be in just a few minutes.
Want to sign yours, Malachi?
Yeah, I got a pen up here.
Should we wait until Libby gets here?
Yeah. Is everybody here?
There she is.
Need one more?
Oh.
Because one will be for you.
Oh.
Where are we going to have our new people sitting?
We're going to be shuffling here in just a minute.
Okay. How are you?
I'm fine, how are you?
I'm okay.
Okay, so Dennis, do you want to wait until we shuffle
You-
and then
you can
have
go ahead and-
Dennis come up?
You can go ahead and do Libby right now if you want.
Well, Dennis, I mean. Do you want him to wait or do you want him to come up?
You can go ahead and come, take one of the empty seats for a minute.
Till it all gets shuffled around.
I thought they were assigned positions, but I guess I don't
That's
know.
not for planning. Take the closest spot here. Oh,
Don't breathe on me.
I don't know. Breathe over here.
Yeah, raise your right hand.
Be able to see.
You have to be able to
That's where Les Poole usually sits,
and
but I don't know
repeat
where he
after
is.
me. I, Libby Wentz,
I, Libby Wentz,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support the Constitution
that I will support the Constitution
of the United States
of the United States
and of the State of Oregon
and of the State of Oregon
and the Charter and Municipal Code
and the Charter and the Municipal Code
of the City of Gladstone,
of the City of Gladstone,
and that I will,
and that I will,
to the best of my ability,
to the best of my ability,
perform the duties of Planning Commissioner
perform the duties of Planning Commissioner
for the City of Gladstone, Oregon,
for the City of Gladstone, Oregon,
during my entire term of office,
during my entire term of office,
so help me God.
so help me God.
Okay? Congratulations. I want to sign your name on both these, and then I'll sign them Like the price is right.
Okay.
Go out there? Yep.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay, so should we do the two separately? Do the chair first and then vice chair?
Yeah.
Okay. So next up, we're going to do the election for the chair. We're going to go ahead and, actually, do you have a preferred way for us to do this?
You can accept nominations for the chair of the planning commission.
Okay. So, entertain some nominations.
I'd like to nominate Les Poole.
Okay.
He's not here though.
Pardon?
He's not here though.
I don't think that really
He's not
matters,
here
so-
to accept the nomination.
Okay.
Okay.
We'll go on to somebody else. You can nominate somebody else.
Randy Roulette.
Thank you.
Okay. Libby?
I don't know anyone to do it well enough.
Nominate yourself.
Just from the planning commission.
You ready? Do you have any nominations?
No.
Okay. So it sounds like between Les and Randy?
Well, Les is not here to accept it. Randy, would you accept the nomination to be chairperson of the planning commission?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
And then you want to close the nominations?
Yeah, sure. So we'll go ahead and close the nominations and do, I guess, a roll call vote.
If you would like to, you could do it that way.
Okay.
Commissioner McCarty,
Yes.
Commissioner Natalie Smith,
Yes.
Commissioner Malachi,
Yes.
Commissioner Poole is absent, Commissioner Wentz,
Yes.
Commissioner Roulette.
Yes. Okay. And so the other thing we had to do is vice chair. Do you want to take over that part of it?
No, go ahead.
Okay. So can we take nominations for the vice chair?
Malachi. I'd like to nominate Malachi.
Okay. Anybody else?
I'll second hers.
Okay. Can we get a roll call?
Do you accept the nomination, Malachi?
Sure.
Okay. Commissioner McCarty,
Yes.
Commissioner Natalie Smith,
Yes.
Commissioner Malachi,
Yes.
Commissioner Poole, Commissioner Wentz,
Yes.
Commissioner Roulette.
Yes. Okay. So before we go on to the training, Tammy wanted to say something?
Whenever,
No,
you
I mean-
guys don't really have a formal business in the audience, so I wasn't sure what that
I'm gonna
fit.
need your help.
I think now
You
would
have
be
to prompt
best
me
because
on
otherwise you'll need
a
to wait an
lot of
hour and a
this.
half probably.
No,
And I can get...
right now, I'm good with that. We have public hearings to do.
Yeah.
Settled.
Scoot down one.
Okay.
Alrighty. Well, thank you for letting me sit up here for a couple of minutes. Planning is where my heart is, so I'm sitting here feeling very lonely when I really feel I should be up there because I love planning and the planning process. And I wanted to just say a couple things about being on Planning Commission. The most important thing, I think, is to come prepared and informed. This is a legal land use process. It's not like a regular committee and board. Please take the time to do your due diligence and ask questions of the staff if you don't know the answers. It's really important that you guys sit up there and are informed. Attendance is critical. It's got a very long learning curve. I was on it for 14 years and I was learning something new all the time. You need to be there because there's always going to be issues that are going to carry forward into another application. Please take the time to listen to the applicants and the public comments. There's going to be a lot of times when you feel that you're being beat up on and that you don't agree with what's being said, but the people that come before you, a lot of them have never done this before. They're uncomfortable. They don't know what the process is. So be patient, guide them, and be respectful. for most of them it's personal, and you kind of have to take that into consideration. Also, if you see any educational opportunities, let staff know, because that is the one thing that we missed for years, was any type of background information to help us do our job better. So don't be afraid to let them know if you see an opportunity, or if you think that you're lacking in something, let them help you. So the other reason I'm sitting up here is because there's some issues that are coming before the city, and I know that potentially you all will be looking at codes and ordinance review, and I would like you guys to consider these, if at all possible, if it fits somewhere in your conversation. First is the stormwater. We have a huge stormwater infrastructure issue. We can't fix this problem quickly or inexpensively, so there's some things that I think we can do and implement that will help. One, I would love to see us implement a disconnect downspout, a rain barrel or rain garden program to try and disconnect as much as we can so it's on-site infiltration instead of overtaxing our collapsing stormwater system. Other jurisdictions already do it, so there's already things in place that we could just copy. The next one is the Boardman Creek Watershed Restoration Project, which ends up feeding into our Glen Echo wetlands, which you all know that every time it rains, we get flooded, and our Main Street manhole covers become Benson bubblers. So we're looking at a holistic approach, bringing in a lot of stakeholders to fix the wetland like it should be, instead of just sticking a bunch of Band-Aids on it. It's been filled, diverted, ignored, and it's time that we fix it right. So we're looking at doing it via some large grants that are out there. Last time we looked at it, about 4 years ago, we felt that if we got them working properly, it would save the city about $5 million in infrastructure upgrades. So I think it's something that's worth looking into, putting everything we can behind it. Next is a heritage tree project. The county has it. I think it's time that we have tree ordinances in place to protect the trees that we have. A couple of the developments that we've had lately, the biggest issue was the loss of trees. People in the community feel very strongly that we need to maintain the trees if possible. I'd like to see some kind of a buffer in place between high density residential and low and medium density and open space. The apartments up on Webster, there's absolutely no buffer, and you have this great nature space with walls of apartments. And if we had thought forward, maybe we could have had something in place that would have put some kind of a buffer in place. Next is a photo simulation. I would like to see that as part of the permitting process. If we would have had photo simulation of the apartments on Webster, we would have put a lot more thought into it, because we would have had a visual of exactly what that was going to look like. Seeing it on paper and seeing a line drawing, elevation drawing, is different than seeing what it's going to look like in place. If anybody has any more questions, not here, call me up, email me, and I would love to talk more about these things. Thank you.
Mayor Stemple?
Yes.
Regarding the photo simulation, that's something that most design firms do, isn't it? So it wouldn't be an extra cost if that was something we requested.
No, it's very, very simple to do.
Okay, and so that's something we can mention to Clay, that anyone who wants to submit something, this is something that needs to be included in the package.
Yeah, I think anything that's a new development or a substantial rebuild or remodel, anything like that that has a height or square footage addition, we should have a photo simulation as part of it.
Oh, also, to go back to the first thing you mentioned about rain barrels and whatnot, are we going to also hopefully encourage people to do bioswales as well?
That's in the county code, and I don't know if it's filtered down to Gladstone level yet. Pat McMahon was one of the first people to actually install a bioswale. There's a couple around town, but yeah, that's just one more way of making sure that there's on-site infiltration instead of feeding our stormwater system.
Is this something I should ask Clay about?
Yeah, he's all over this. He's a sustainability man. And I know that we have people in the city that are experts at this that would love to volunteer their time to help people design them or install them. And we could buy materials at wholesale cost so that people, rain barrels, for example, we could get them at a really low cost. We could probably even get grants to get some of these materials.
Thank you very much.
Anything else? Thank you.
So, unrelated to that,
Yes.
we do have a letter here from Kim, and I was just wondering, what is the current status of the liaison appointments for this?
I'm going to be making those, is it the next week's meeting? Yes.
Okay.
Yeah,
thank you.
so I appreciate everybody's input. It's been wonderful, and I'm glad it's not on my shoulders alone, but I'm getting feedback from everybody. I really, really appreciate that.
I apologize, I forgot to get that to you.
Natalie, you need to get it to me.
May I still submit it to you?
Absolutely.
Okay,
Yeah.
I will do so tomorrow.
Okay, thank
I
you.
apologize for that.
Thank you.
What am I
Okay.
supposed to do?
I think I have the next item on the agenda.
Yeah.
Is my microphone on? Can you hear me okay?
Mhm.
I'm going to start by introducing myself. I recognize most of your faces and have worked with many of you, but my name is Ashley Driscoll, and I'm with the City Attorney's Office. At Gladstone, you typically work with 2 attorneys from my office, myself and David Doofman. David Doofman is typically at the Planning Commission meeting, so you'll get to know him pretty well. I'm going to be doing your ethics and land use training tonight, and I will be here off and on. So with that, I'm going to go over the materials I have in front of you, and then I'm going to get started because we have quite a lot of information to go over. So because we have so much information to go over, and I formerly come from a consulting background, I put together an agenda right before I left the office today with reference on where you can find this information in your packet. So if you're wondering how I'm going to organize the training tonight, this is an outline of where I'm going. But before I start, I'm going to go over the materials that are already in your packet. So I have 3 things in here. The first thing is I have a land use cheat sheet, ex parte context, conflicts of interest, and bias. I put this together for training. I did similar to this for a different client. I think it's useful, so I'm going to be going over this pretty carefully during our training. I also put in the City of Gladstone legal requirements for land use decision making, which is about 20 pages long. And then the Oregon Government Ethics handout, which is, I believe, another 20 or 25 pages long. These materials are primarily background reference materials for you to use as you go through this process. There is a lot of information in there. Some of it is overlapping. For instance, conflicts of interest are both in your land use process, legal requirements of land use process, and your government ethics guide. So those documents, again, I'm not going to go through them page by page. They're there for your reference if you have any questions after this training. I do advise that you keep them. One other thing is in here, it's the public records and public meetings handout. I am not going to be going over that tonight because we previously went over that at another meeting. Was everybody here for that? Okay. So because we've already gone over that, I'm not going to go over that again tonight. But you do have the full reference material in here. I do know that we have at least 2 new Planning Commission members here tonight, so I'm going to do a high-level overview of the role of a Planning Commissioner, and then I'm going to go straight into the ethics training. The meat and potatoes of what I'm doing tonight is ethics training, but you really can't understand the government ethics piece of it if you don't really understand your role as a Planning Commissioner. So that's where I'm going to start. So, as I'm sure that you're aware, the Planning Commission meets once a month. And the majority of what you're doing is deciding or making land use decisions or recommendations for the City of Gladstone. As you may be aware, this is a very involved legal process, and you are going to have help along the way. At each one of these meetings, some representative from my office, either me or David's going to be here. You have your planner from Clackamas County, Clay. He will be here. And your city recorder, Jackie Betts, will be here. We're all your resources for guiding you through this process. We can answer questions both at the meetings and before the meetings. So please use us and do not be intimidated by everything we're going over here today. It's our job to keep you on track. So, as I mentioned, your job as planning commissioners is to make 2 different types of decisions for the City of Gladstone. The first type is legislative decisions, and the second type is quasi-judicial decisions. So, I'm going to start off with going over legislative decisions because they're the most straightforward. When you're making legislative decisions, you are deciding to make changes to Gladstone's code regarding land use. So everything that Mayor Stemple just went over, the changes that she would like to see to the stormwater, those sort of issues, those are legislative decisions. Those are decisions you make setting policy for the city of Gladstone. You know, to use very colloquial terms, that's when you're acting as the legislator. You're making the laws. And when you're making the laws, you're drafting criteria that have to be met for each one of the decisions. So, again, using very simple terms, a legislative decision is when you're acting as a lawmaker and setting code. The second type of decision is applying that language. So quasi-judicial decisions are applying the criteria that is already in the code. So when an individual comes in here with an application and they ask you for, you know, a subdivision or a partition or a zone change that applies only to their land or to a small number of properties, that is when you're applying the pre-existing language already in the code to that person's land. Those are called quasi-judicial decisions. Quasi-judicial decisions, which involve individual applications and applying the land use code, have more procedural requirements. And one of those procedural requirements is you have to be impartial as decision makers. And when we talk about the ethics training, the conflicts of interest, bias, ex parte contacts, a lot of that is geared towards the fact that those individuals in your community who are asking you to apply their city code deserve for their issue to be heard by an impartial panel of judges, which is you. So there is a lot of laws that dictate how you handle those hearings. I'm going to go over some of them. I've put them in your packet, but again, it is our job to generally keep you on track. So I'm going to come back to those, but I'm going to talk a little bit right now about the process. As planning commissioners, you are making decisions or recommendations on behalf of the city. Your decision or recommendation can be appealed up to the city council. So if an applicant comes in, you deny their application, they can take that application and appeal it and have a very similar hearing in front of the city council. If they are unhappy with the city council's decision, they can appeal that up to the Land Use Appeals Board, Land Use Board of Appeals, LUBA. They can have their case heard at LUBA, and if they are still unhappy with the decision, they can appeal it to the Court of Appeals. What matters for you guys is that by the time the issue gets to LUBA or the Court of Appeals, the record is set. So if the city is defending its decision at LUBA, we have to make sure that, you know, all the criteria for the application was met, all the evidence was in the record at this level and at the city council level, because we're not going to get another shot at it. So making sure that you understand the criteria, making sure that there's evidence in the record to support the criteria is a very important role in this process.
Can I pause you there for a minute?
Yeah.
So during the meetings, you know, Tammy regularly would mention LUBA to the people in the audience.
Mm-hmm.
So is it true that they would have to speak up during this meeting in order to challenge it later?
Yes. So that's called the raise it or waive it requirement. So this is all going to be about fairness. So we're going to talk a lot about fairness. So fairness to both parties. If an applicant or participant in the hearing wants to make an argument in front of LUBA, they need to make it in front of you folks here and the rest of the community. And the idea is, if you're going to make an argument, the other side needs an opportunity to rebut it. So if you only bring it up at LUBA, the other interested party doesn't have the opportunity to rebut it. So if you're going to make the argument, you need to make it here.
So if an applicant left a planning commission meeting, came to the next one the following month, it would be too late for him to say, or he or she, I want to take this before LUBA?
If we close the hearing.
If you had closed the hearing.
Okay.
If the hearing had been continued and you're still on that subject matter and you hadn't made any sort of decision or recommendation, it's still open. But
gotcha.
If it closes.
And as far as the record, that's the video record or our transcripts?
So the entire, the transcripts count, any documentation submitted by the applicant or opponents, any testimony given here, all of that together is the record.
Okay, say someone in the audience was at one of our meetings, public hearings here,
and they did not testify. But then during the city council meeting, when they go over the agenda, you know, the city council is going to approve our recommendation. What if they testified during that part of the hearing? Would they be able to
Appeal it?
do an appeal?
So, if they had been in the audience during the planning commission and didn't say anything, they did not participate. So they can't be the one that appeals it up to the city council, because you have to be a participant. But if they participate at the city council level, yes, then they would have standing to appeal it to LUBA.
So they would simply just need to be at that city council meeting during the discussion and testify, and that would make them a party to the hearing.
I'm a participant, yep. One more question, then I'm going to keep moving.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Just as a procedurally, how do these fall? We've got 3 items on the agenda, and there's obviously nobody here.
Mm-hmm.
So, because we came to the party, I did, late in January, and some of these were already on, one of them was on the agenda already.
Uh-huh.
So did they already establish what they needed by attending an earlier meeting?
So the 3 items on your agenda, I believe this will be the first hearing on all of those items.
Okay.
Because if you didn't, the meeting was not held in January, so that meeting didn't actually occur. So.
Are you, sorry, Ashley, are you referring to the extension one
No,
of the
I was
subdivision?
really only speaking to the marijuana.
The marijuana, okay,
because
yeah.
that's the only one I saw originally.
This is your approval for tonight, considerations, yes.
So him not being here, that voids his ability to appeal it?
The meeting was not held.
He's talking about tonight.
I mean, tonight.
Yeah.
It's at 6:30.
It's at 6:30, yeah.
Ours is just special training right
This
now.
is just training,
Right.
so they'll be here at 6:30 tonight.
Oh, okay, so, all right,
Yep.
that answers. Thank you.
So going back to the quasi-judicial hearing versus the legislative hearing, one of the big differences between the two is that a quasi-judicial decision has to be made within 120 days, a final decision by the city. And the reason is that a quasi-judicial decision is an issue regarding how somebody can use their land. So it would not be fair to that person for the city to inevitably put off a final decision. So the city has 120 days to make a decision on a quasi-judicial matter. In contrast, for a legislative decision, you don't ever have to make a decision because that's policy. You could, go back and forth on it for as long as you want before you finally make a decision. There's no clock for legislative decisions. So as I touched on before, one of the big differences is that for quasi-judicial decisions, you're dealing with due process rights for each of the applicants. And we talked about the fact that there's a lot of procedural laws for quasi-judicial. They're aimed at 3 things. For a due process, or for property rights, you have to give due process, which is notice, an opportunity to be heard and rebut evidence, and an impartial decision maker. We're going to talk about that one a little later. And then finally, there has to be a record and a final decision in writing supported by findings. So there has to be a very clear path for an individual to find out why you made the decision that you made. So your main role as a planning commissioner is to apply pre-existing criteria to the application. This is a really important point. So when you're making a decision, you have to find that there is substantial evidence in the record that each one of the criteria that applies to the application is met. The criteria already has to exist in the code, so you cannot make a decision based on your general like or dislike of a certain industry, a certain business, or a certain person. Everything has to be grounded in the criteria that is pre-existing in the code. And then on top of that, you have to either approve the decision, deny the decision, or approve it with conditions. And with conditions means that you would otherwise approve the decision if a criteria that's already in the code is not addressed in the application but could easily be addressed. For instance, if you have an application for design review and one of the applicable criteria is a buffering requirement, but the application is void of any information about buffering, You could, one, deny the application because it did not meet all the criteria in the code, or two, approve the application but make a condition of your approval that they meet the buffering requirement in the code. Was there a question?
Yeah, when you keep saying code, are you talking about Gladstone Municipal Code or Clackamas County?
Gladstone Municipal Code. So you are only making decisions based on the Gladstone Municipal Code, the land use code.
So when Clay makes a recommendation, or because he does our plan review, or for us, is he applying, when he reviews it, is he applying only the Gladstone Municipal Code?
Is only to, yes.
Well, actually, he does mention whether it's the Gladstone Municipal or the county or the state, and he'll say on each item which one it is.
But generally, the decisions you guys are making are on the Gladstone Development Code, because that's what you have an authority to make a decision based on.
I do have a question about something you said. So, you know, we have to limit ourselves to the municipal code, but we can attach criteria, right? Sometimes the things we attach are things like, they must coordinate and comply with, like, the fire department, police department, things like that. Does that put any question that maybe the applicant would be treated unfairly if that department didn't agree with them?
So again, all your you have to make decisions based on the criteria in your code.
Yeah.
So for instance, I know one of the applications tonight, as a condition of approval, they have to comply with your building code.
Yeah.
So again, it all has to be grounded in what's in the Gladstone Municipal Code, and specifically the Development Code. It's all about fairness to the applicant. They have to be able to look at the Gladstone Municipal Code and write an application that meets those criteria. We can't have criteria that are not very clearly laid out applied to somebody's application, because then you have due process concerns.
Okay.
That make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. So, I think that's pretty clear. When you're looking at an application for quasi-judicial, you look at the code, you determine which criteria apply to that application, and then you determine if the evidence in the record, it would be reasonable to say that that criteria is met. And again, if this went up to LUBA, if this was appealed to the City Council and then up to LUBA's not going to they're not going to substitute their judgment for your judgment. What they're going to look at is say, could a reasonable person believe that this criteria was met in the application? And if the answer is yes, they're going to support your decision. If the answer is no, it can be remanded or reversed. So in terms of procedural, for quasi-judicial, you have to give notice to property owners generally within 200 feet of the affected property 20 days prior to the hearing. Again, this is just for you to know. The staff takes care of the majority of this. The notice is going to contain all applicable criteria for making the decision and identify the property. It's also going to contain a staff report. That's the notice. Then there's going to be a staff report that is 7 days prior to the hearing. And the staff report is what you have in your packet. Again, it identifies the criteria, it identifies if the staff believes the criteria is met, and it makes a recommendation. That's going to be available to the public 7 days prior to the hearing. Once you have the hearing, all the hearings are going to start exactly the same. Again, you're going to state the applicable criteria. You're going to state that all testimony and other evidence must be directed towards the criteria or criteria the person believes is applicable to the decision. And they are going to do a warning that if you do not bring forward an issue during the hearing, the person is going to waive the right to bring it up later on. Again, that raise it or waive it requirement. A participant can request that the Planning Commission either continue a hearing or keep the record open for an additional rollout or additional period. That's, again, something that we're going to help walk you through, but generally at the end of the hearing, if a participant believes that there's more evidence that he or she needs to bring into the hearing, they can have an opportunity to extend the hearing or keep the record open to submit that evidence. Yes.
Does that affect the 120 days?
That has a big impact on the 120 days. So the extensions are not permanent. They're typically 7 days to submit new information, and then a 7-day response period, and then a 7-day re-response period, essentially. So 21 days, essentially, to keep the record open. And that 120 days is something that we all keep our eye on to make sure that we meet. So when you actually have the hearing is going to start with, again, those notices to the public. Then Clay is going to do a staff report where he goes over the criteria and makes his recommendations. Then you're going to hear from the applicant and then supporters of the application, those individuals who do not support the application. Then the applicant is going to have a period to rebut. And then finally, you're going to close the hearing. Does that make sense how you roll it out? Staff report, applicant, supporters, detractors, applicant gets to rebut, and then you close the hearing. Once the hearing is closed and you have all the evidence into the record, you are going to deliberate and make a decision or recommendation. Again, the final product of your deliberations will be written findings that you're going to direct staff to make regarding whether or not the criteria is met and whether or not you're approving with conditions or denying the application. So I know I ran through a lot of information about quasi-judicial hearings. Really what you should take away from it is look at the information the applicant submits, look at the criteria in the code, and make a determination whether the information that you have in front of you, the information that you gather from the hearing, means that the applicant met all the criteria, and if they did, the application should be approved. If they do not, you can deny the application, or you can condition the application so it does meet the criteria in the code. Any questions about that?
So the advantage of approving with condition is then just whatever the problem is can be addressed, so it doesn't have to keep rolling over and coming back and
An
stuff?
example might be that we may approve it with the condition that they add a buffer, and that means that they don't have to come back to us once they've added the buffer, right?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I gotcha.
It's generally something that's not addressed in the application that is, appears to be an oversight. That when the applicant was going through the code, they didn't realize that this other criteria applied, so they didn't put it in the application, but they could very easily comply with it.
A good example was the trailer at the property down where the pizza place was. And we, in our ordinances, there's criteria regarding buffers, landscaping, how to make it look nice other than just a metal box sitting there, and that it had to be wood siding, not metal. So there's criteria in the codes that you can utilize to, am I saying that right now? Okay.
Exactly.
Yeah. Because it'll be like, this is the thing that was hard for me to understand. There's things in the codes where it says certain things are outright permitted, but you do have conditional ways to make that situation a little bit better, or to make it look more pleasing, or to follow suit with what everyone else is doing, that kind of thing. I'm probably not explaining it very well.
And there are cases where we can only do recommendations too, right?
Yes,
Exactly.
there are certain types of decisions, and I can run down
I
the...
meant in terms of the conditionals, not just conditions, but there's cases where we can just recommend some changes that we can't actually require of them.
Yes. Yeah, certain changes. And when those come up, we're going to guide you through that process, things that you can do, things that you can't do. So that's quasi-judicial decisions. Again, because it deals with people's use of their property, there's a lot of legal restrictions around it. On the other side of the spectrum, you have your legislative decisions. Legislative decisions, you still, under the Gladstone Municipal Code, need to hold a public hearing. However, the notice requirements, the hearing requirements are generally not as strict. Again, you don't have that 120 days clock, so you can have more extended discussions. You do not have to make a decision. You do not have to change your code. It's policy, and again, you're acting as the legislature. So those are your two types of hearings, legislative and quasi-judicial. So when I talked about being an impartial decision maker, there are a couple ethical issues that you should be aware of in your role as a planning commissioner. Now, as I said, some of this information is slightly overlapping, and the ethics portion of this is a great example. So there's two things to keep in mind when we talk about the ethics. First of all, if some of these ethical rules are violated, it could impact the decision that you're making. So if a decision you make goes up to LUBA, and it turns out that you had a conflict of interest, or you had a bias, or you had an ex parte conflict, that decision could have to be remanded back to the city. So your actions by not disclosing this information, not sharing the conflict of interest, could undermine the decision that you're making. On the other hand, you also have to deal with the Oregon Ethics Commission. So those decisions, if you have conflicts of interest, if you have ex parte conflicts, if you abuse your office, those could have an impact on you as a commissioner, and you could have to face a civil penalty up to $5,000. You could have to pay double the amount that you gained by participating in that decision, and you could have to pay attorney's fees. So these ethical issues that we're going to over have, two different impacts: impact on your decision and impact on you as a commissioner. So when we go to this, I would like you to turn to your land use cheat sheet. Again, I think this is a pretty good guide to ex parte conflicts, or ex parte contacts, conflicts of interest, and bias. So,
Again? I'm just kidding.
well, I'm going to have to a couple more times. Again, these are aimed at a fair and impartial hearing process. So I think everybody generally understands what an ex parte contact is. It's when you meet with somebody or have a conversation with somebody who is interested in the matter that's going to come before you. That is an ex parte contact. So an ex parte contact is any communication between an interested party and a counselor, or in this case a commissioner, made outside the hearing process. However, ex parte contacts come in many more forms than just a conversation with an interested party. Essentially, it's any information that you gather outside this hearing process that you're going to use to make a decision. That can be an internet search, that can be some site visits, it can be reading an editorial in the newspaper, it can be a conversation, it could be a radio program. Again, this is all aimed at fairness. And if you are gathering information that you're going to use to make a decision on a matter that's coming before you at a hearing, the applicant and those involved in the process deserve the opportunity to understand that information and potentially rebut it. So ex parte contacts are more than just conversation. There's any information you gather outside the hearing process that you could use in making a decision.
So if somebody were to bombard the area with, say, TV commercials, that would actually be ex parte?
That would definitely be an ex parte contact. Okay. However, we all understand that you live in the city of Gladstone, and it is inevitable that you are going to have ex parte contacts. You can't stop people from emailing you. You can't stop, witnessing a commercial or so forth. Having ex parte contacts is not an issue. The issue is that when you have those contacts, you need to disclose them. So in this sheet, I put, what is an ex parte contact, which we already went over. Should you disclose an ex parte contact? Yes. Yes, you definitely should. So it does not render a decision unlawful. That information just needs to be put on the record. So how do you disclose? You do two things. At the beginning of the hearing, and there will be an opportunity set out by the chair for you to do this, you announce that you have had an ex parte contact, and you put that on the record. And then second, you put the substance of your ex parte contact in the record too. So it's both that you had the contact, and second, here's what I found out, here's what I've been told. Again, it's all about fairness. So once you put it on the record, somebody from the audience has an opportunity to rebut that information if they want to. So I also put down a sample disclosure language. I'd like to disclose that I had the following ex parte contact. Notwithstanding these contacts, I will be able to render an impartial decision on this matter. It's as easy as that. A lot of times people ask about your conversations with staff. Conversations with staff are generally not ex parte contacts. You can talk to me, you can talk to the planner, you can talk to anybody at the city about a matter without it having to come before or without it having to be disclosed. However, the more you abuse that, if you're trying to use staff as a conduit to gather information, then you're going to run into that gray area of that being an ex parte contact. So generally, I would advise err on the side of caution. Go ahead and disclose ex parte contacts. You'd be better off. So conflicts of interest. Conflicts of interest are a little bit more difficult. So officially, a conflict of interest arises when you are whether the decision you are making would or could result in a private pecuniary benefit or detriment to you, your relatives, or any business in which either you or your relatives are associated. These come in two forms: actual or potential conflicts of interest. So first of all, let's talk about that. So conflicts of interest do not just have to do with you. They have to do with your entire family too. On the second page, it goes who is a relative. Under state law, a relative is your spouse, domestic partner, children, or your spouse's children, your siblings, spouses of your siblings, parents, parents of your spouse. Relatives also generally include anybody that you support or supports you. So it is a pretty expansive definition. It also has to do with any business that you're associated with. I'm not going to read this entire paragraph, but if you're wondering if the business counts, I would take a look at these 4 factors. So pecuniary benefit is a financial benefit or detriment. You are going to make decisions that will have a financial impact on individuals in your community. Again, for impartiality's sake, it is unfair if when making those decisions you stand to benefit or be hurt by those decisions, and that's why you have conflicts of interest. An actual conflict of interest is when you would actually benefit from the outcome of the decision. The easiest example is if you own a piece of land and you want to rezone it so you can open a new business. You are going to have an actual benefit or detriment by the result of that decision, and therefore you have an actual conflict of interest. In that case, when you have an actual conflict of interest, you need to announce it at the beginning of the hearing, and then you are not to participate as a commissioner in any of the deliberations or the decisions. So if you would actually have a financial benefit by the decision, you cannot participate. And by you, I mean you, your relatives, or your business.
Should we be sitting in the audience or leaving?
I think it's easier if you leave. So especially if you want to participate, if you want to add something, you can add something as a community member, but you can't participate as a commissioner. Potential conflicts of interest are a little bit more difficult. So something that could impact you financially. So one of the great examples is if you all, or most of you, own property in Gladstone. Let's say that a big subdivision is going to come, within 1,000 feet of your house, and it's going to impact traffic, and you're worried that it could have a impact on the value of your home, or a business locating near you that could have an impact in your home. That is a potential conflict of interest. With potential conflicts of interest, you can participate in the hearing. But what you have to do is you have to announce the potential conflict of interest at the beginning of the hearing, and then you have to be able to make a statement that says, despite this potential conflict of interest, I can still impartially render a decision on this matter. And after you do that, the audience is going to have the opportunity to challenge you. So they can also challenge you for ex parte conflicts and bias, which we'll get to in a moment. Under the Gladstone City Code, what happens after you've been challenged is that the remaining members of the commission will take a vote. Because again, how you handle it as an individual commissioner can impact the validity of the decision that you're making. So how Gladstone has decided to handle this is if somebody challenges your conflict and your ability to render an impartial decision, the rest of the commissioners are going to vote on it. And if they vote that you should not participate, you are not going to participate in the matter. And again, not to hammer this one, the other impact is if you are found to have an ethical violation for a conflict of interest by the Oregon Ethics Committee, you could face financial penalties. Again, I'm your attorney and I'm always going to say this, but you know, I would err on the side of caution with conflicts of interest. Let's make sure I got everything.
She does always say that.
So there are class exceptions. You're going to make decisions that impact a large group of people. For instance, if you are doing a legislative change that redid the zoning map in Gladstone, that could impact you financially. However, you're being impacted as a class. Another example is...
to clarify that, you mean just like everybody else?
Just like everybody else. So similarly to the city council, if the city council is going to vote to raise rates on your stormwater or any other fee in the city, that fee is going to affect the city council too. But they all can't not vote on it because they have a conflict. The way out of that is that conflicts of interest do not apply if you're part of a class. However, and you know there's a however, the line between what qualifies as a class is a pretty fuzzy one. So if you have a potential conflict but you believe you're part of a class, what I would advise you do is contact your assistant city administrator and myself, and we'll take a look at this situation to see if it qualifies as a class exception to conflict of interest.
This came up with the Verizon Tower in terms of who was and who wasn't having conflicts.
Okay, so that's a great example because it affects a large amount of people, but does it affect a large enough amount of people to qualify as a class? And again, I would err on the side of caution. So for conflicts of interest, how often do you disclose? You must make the required disclosure every time the matter comes before you. So that's a lot of opportunities for somebody to challenge you. So the last one in this is bias. So bias is actually a pretty high bar to reach. Especially when making legislative decisions, you come with some level of bias. You are policy makers. So let's look at what actual bias is in this context. Bias means a prejudice or prejudgment of the parties or the case to such a degree you are incapable of being persuaded by facts to vote another way. This can include personal interest or personal prejudgment. There's no such thing as apparent bias. The person challenging you has to prove actual bias. So what is personal interest? Personal interest also looks a lot like conflicts of interest. Personal interest is an actual interest in the outcome of the proceedings. For example, you live in or near a development and actively support or oppose the development. So, if you have been so outspoken on an issue in the community and you're saying that, because you live in this building, you could never consider the lot next to you being developed any way other than X, Y, and Z. So you've gone out there and you've said, under no circumstances will I allow X to happen. And then X comes before you as a planning commissioner and you're asked to make an impartial decision. Somebody may challenge you. Somebody may say that you've been so outspoken on this issue, I don't believe that you're going to apply the city's code in an impartial manner and and give me my due process rights. So I would be careful on that one. And the last one is prejudgment. This exists when you have so prejudged a particular matter as to be incapable of determining its merits on the basis of evidence or arguments presented at the hearing. Prejudgment must be proven with explicit statements, pledges, or commitments on a specific matter before the commission. The one that I have seen before is a planning commissioner that feels strongly about a certain developer in town. That this developer, never follows the rules, always does shoddy work, and has been outspoken about that. So that developer comes before you, again, as a individual with due process rights and, seeks your decision and application. And that person believes that you have so prejudged him or her that you can't render an impartial decision. And you go through the same process. At the beginning of the hearing, the chair is going to ask for conflicts of interest, ex parte contacts, and bias. You can do a disclosure. You can say, yes, I have, been critical of so-and-so's work in the past. However, I am able to make an impartial decision based on facts in this matter. And then that person, if he or she is there, can challenge you. The planning commissioner would have a vote, and we would go from there. So again, if there is actual bias, you must recuse yourself. If you do actually not believe that you can make a fair decision, you should probably not participate. Even if there's not actual bias, you may want to disclose information that gives the appearance of bias in order to preclude post-hearing challenges to your participation. Again, it's all about fairness. It's best if you put everything out there and give the audience members and the applicants the opportunity to respond to it and challenge you. And in that way, you're going to actually protect the city's decision later on. So just a review really quick. In terms of challenging your land use decision, there are 4 ways somebody can challenge your land use decision. They can challenge that an ex parte contact was not disclosed. They can challenge an actual conflict of interest, a potential conflict of interest, and bias. As city commissioners, your job is to make disclosures, and as long as you don't have actual bias or an actual conflict of interest, if you make those disclosures and you believe you can be impartial, there's no reason why you can't participate unless challenged. So, again, summarizing, those can be bases for your decision being challenged. They can also be bases for you as individual commissioners to have to go before the Oregon Ethics Commission and face fines and penalties if you benefit financially from those decisions. There are also independent Oregon Ethics Commission regulations that you should be aware of. So, going back to the outline, use of public office. So use of public office for personal financial benefit or to avoid a detriment. That is, again, covers a lot of similar territory as conflicts of interest. As a planning commissioner, you cannot use your role as a planning commissioner to somehow benefit yourself in land use hearings. It is also a wider scope. So under the Oregon ethics laws, you can't use your position to have any financial benefit. One of the classic cases in this is, let's say that the city was buying brand new chairs for you as commissioners, and the city could get, since they are ordering 7, they got the 8th free. And as a planning commissioner, you're like, well, I need a chair. I'll go ahead and take the 8th chair. You are getting a financial benefit that you would only get because of your role as a planning commissioner, and therefore receiving that chair, although it costs the city nothing, could be the basis for an ethical challenge for you. So I would be cognizant of that you're not in any way financially benefiting simply because you're on the planning commission. You also need to be aware of receiving gifts from individuals who have a potential legislative or administrative interest in your decision making. So again, let's say that there's a developer in town who repeatedly takes you out to dinner and you have these expensive dinners, or gives you a very nice Christmas present, and then all of a sudden he or she is sitting in front of you as an applicant for the city. That definitely looks like you got those fancy dinners or that gift card as a quid pro quo for your vote in some sort of planning matter that has to do with that individual. So as planning commissioners, you are not to receive a gift over $50 from somebody who could have a legislative or administrative interest in your decision making. There are a couple exceptions. So if that developer happens to be your brother and he's a family member and that's a Christmas gift, obviously that's going to be an exception. So this excludes family members. This also excludes reimbursement for travel. If you go to, any sort of training and the city pays for that, that is not a gift. However, if they pay for you and your spouse, the payment for your spouse will be seen as a gift, and that will be something that you cannot receive. So be cognizant of receiving gifts for somebody that has an interest in your decision making as a commissioner. Confidential information. So you are going to be privy to some confidential information as a planning commissioner. You cannot use that confidential information to, again, your financial gain, essentially selling information that you might have as part of your role to anybody who would be interested in it. And the last thing that you need to be aware of is the reporting requirements. In order to be able to verify that these things are not happening, the Oregon Ethics Committee asks that you fill out an annual verified statement of economic interest. That should be filed by February 15th. And what I am told is that the state contacts you directly, and you fill out, I believe, a form online. Some of you have already been through this. And I hear it's relatively easy.
So the very first year, actually, the city provided me with the information, and then after that, the state did. So new members might be getting it from the city itself.
Actually, it was changed. The state now sends it directly to you as
It was
planning
pretty
commission.
quickly after I was appointed.
Yes.
Because I think I contacted Jolene at the time and I said, do I have to do this? She's like, yeah, go ahead and do it.
Yes.
Well, they had a statement at the bottom of, at least the one I filled out. I registered, got my passwords and all that, and they said that we'd be contacted at a later date with the form to fill it out.
Yes.
That would,
Yeah.
So this would have happened already, because stuff goes to my junk mail and I don't look for it, so
happened this last
it'll be,
week.
so pay attention now?
Well, it's due April 15th is when it's due, so you should be starting to get something soon. But Tammy is the one who updates the elected officials and the commissioners that get that information. It used to be that we would be the ones responsible for making sure you submitted it. Now the state's just dealing directly with you. So go through your junk mail.
It doesn't say, it doesn't have that title on it. It had something like OP-US or something.
Yeah, State of Oregon. Well,
Yeah.
actually, it was probably...
I don't remember exactly.
So that is all that I have for you in ethics training. Are there questions?
I have two things that I remember from when I started that maybe be worth mentioning for the new people. One is what we can and can't talk about with city council because of the possibility of appeals. And then the other one is what we can and can't talk about with other people or each other prior to the public hearing starting.
Okay. So in terms of, let's start with sharing information from planning commissioners. That has two separate implications. The first implication we've already talked about at a prior meeting, and that's an inadvertent public meeting. If you're going to be sharing information and deliberating about the matter, it should be in a fully noticed public hearing. And then second, anytime you're gathering information outside the public process, those are ex parte contacts. So, if you find an internet article and you send it to other planning commissioners, not only do you have an ex parte contact by researching and finding the article, each one of you that received it has it as well. And again, if you're an applicant, you could say, I wasn't able to respond to whatever was in that information, and so that needs to be part of the public process. And second, again, to your first point, be cognizant that your decisions and recommendations can be appealed up to the city council, and any communication you have on the subject matter is ex parte contacts to them. And again, to keep the process as clean as possible, it's best if you avoid having those conversations. I know I went over a lot of information, and one of the things I did that I hope helps you is that I noted where in the materials you can go back and find more information. So the brief overview of the role of you as a planning commissioner, that's in legal requirements for land use decision making. Gladstone procedures you can look in your Gladstone Municipal Code, which I advise that you do, and become familiar with the Gladstone hearing process. You can also read the legal requirements for land use decision making. And also, I would become relatively familiar with ORS 197.763, which is included in the materials, which is the state law for quasi-judicial hearings. It might make more sense if you read the actual source and kind of fill in what we are talking about tonight. And then ethics, again, I think the cheat sheet, you can tell me if that's helpful for you. It certainly is helpful for me. I would keep that on you. You can also look at the legal requirements for land use decision making and the Oregon ethics materials that I gave you.
Thank you, Ashley.
Yep.
Thank you very, very much.
Good stuff.
Keep you guys out of trouble.
We want to stay out of trouble.
Chair Roulette, I would suggest a brief break so we can transition.
I think we need a brief break for transition.
That's good.
So we can go get a drink and stuff now? Or just, well,
Meeting
not
is
alcohol.
not
I know.
Yeah, you
Go
can
out
go
there.
get
What do you have here?
A beer.
Yeah, so,
Sorry,
Kind of
I
feels
was
like
late.
after that you might want
My
one.
truck broke down on the
the wording on
freeway.
here, so this is
Oh,
ours, this is
Yeah, I couldn't get over it. It was a backup.
Are all three of
Car
them?
behind me.
Are all three of these plugged in?
Well, I was a witness.
Okay.
I watched it in my rearview mirror.
I was
Well,
just
thank
gonna
goodness
make sure you
I was not at
Jody,
that.
you also.
I know, their car
Yeah.
jerked forward.
Yeah.
Public meeting?
Behind me.
That's scary.
I ducked when I saw their car coming, but I was actually, and I wasn't just gonna, and it was pretty obvious whose fault it was,
Yeah.
but and it's on the freeway.
Okay.
That's why I try to be as repetitive as
Feel like you're in the
possible.
weeds there?
Oh, well, first things first.
Yeah.
Good,
It's how I-
right?
It's how I
So-
live.
Just have my contact
I wish I could have got here in
Probably
time.
not.
You should probably have it, so if you can't make a meeting, you can let me know.
Yeah, I'll let,
Chair
staff.
So which item are you here for?
Sorry I couldn't get here. Good
Oh.
to see you there.
Thanks.
I was in Salem today, and you know, Murphy's Law, I'm with some people. We get ready to leave the Capitol. She can't find her iPad.
Oh,
Well, it's
no.
4 o'clock. I had plenty of time to get here. So then we get up, we're leaving Salem, we're on the freeway, and there's a truck breaks down, and we're sitting there in traffic, and all of a
Everyone was
sudden,
kinda
the
like,
car behind me just gets
Crazy.
rear-ended.
Okay.
Oh,
And I
no.
was watching my rearview mirror, so I was aware.
Damn
The
it.
car,
We've talked.
No problem.
and their car jerked ahead, and I
I'll be
ducked.
disclosing that.
They were far behind me. They got hit, so I couldn't just, so, I mean, I'll call her phone number and whatever.
I mean, we weren't
But
really
anyway,
clear on
I wish I could have been here.
anyway.
I think you'll do just fine.
Oh, yeah, I just gotta get the.
Well, you get used to some of the little
procedures.
I wasn't sure what
technicalities,
you were
but,
saying, you know,
but,
and
There's a lot of typos.
you know,
I didn't want to.
I think a lot of it's just, you know,
Didn't want to vote on that.
I know,
a little
right?
bit of experience
Because there's sometimes
already
things
and
like this
being
that you
around.
Thanks.
All right, y'all ready to do this again? It's only been 30 years or however long it's been.
Yeah. Yeah, I was like in my 20s last time.
Well, it's been a while.
Yeah,
It
it's
was
been
before
like
the
10
Oregon land use laws, right?
Yeah. When you just did
Seriously, how long
whatever you
ago was it?
Dennis is new.
wanted. I was trying to remember, I think I went from.
Libby and
Maybe.
Libby went. She'll be right back.
And there
There's
will,
Patrick.
Clay, there will be a Patrick, but he's not here tonight.
I think about 96 sometime to 2006, 7, something like that.
For the bad.
Yeah, there's
It'll be
some-
just a few minutes.
You know, it's funny how much
about 6:30.
positive, but I think it's
So
conversation.
the first thing we do is I gotta call the meeting to order, right?
Well, so, you can ask her, but we've already went through your part of the meeting.
So you called meeting to order.
Yeah, I did.
Yeah,
So,
we're-
we've gone through this press conference.
Okay.
We just took a brief recess, so we'll be continuing this.
So I highlighted it. This was what I was describing.
and then the regular agenda, and then go through these individual items. I hear that Clay may want to look at that.
There's the driveway.
Here?
And then,
in this
well,
step,
so,
we need to
so
make sure if there's any
this, I
changes
own
need to be done,
this,
because
these
we're
two
committed to
pieces.
this record.
And there's, the lots are like this now, and there's a house on each one of those. And so I'm gonna take access through here,
And would
and
your
I'm
wife
trying to find this piece from that guy.
Yeah, just tell me this part I have to read.
Oh,
Yeah.
I don't remember whether it's all.
We did item number one, so next is item number two.
no, the access will all be from here. It'll be just
So
so
don't,
that all, the only,
the chair normally.
Maybe they
the
have
only
water,
purpose for that would
maybe.
be just to get the
I don't
square
think we normally have to
footage.
resume.
Yeah.
Way back.
But when we resume, you can say.
And then I was
Yeah.
thinking that
Yep.
after,
It's all
I
gonna
don't
be
know,
fun.
if it's
So-
okay, just to make that an easement for like your use.
Go ahead.
That way they would just use
Okay.
it, yeah.
Because if somebody has something they need to change, we need to get that changed on the
I just
record.
wanted
Water and cups right there.
We're gonna be signing on by road.
She went back.
So if there's those changes, we need to.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I remember how all that stuff works.
I forgot my glasses, so this will go quicker than it otherwise would.
Pound it.
I'm very pleased to
When they
know that
selected me, I
So
went
AR.
stop and then relearn the Pledge of Allegiance. That was my first.
So you were nominated, however, with you not being here, we weren't able to select
Yeah,
you.
gonna
All right.
Okay.
Appreciate it.
I
Well,
thought you'd like to know.
He's our vice chair, he's
well,
our chair.
it's really hard to.
Thought you'd like to know.
I appreciate the nomination. I'm sorry I couldn't get here.
That you can connect
Just say your
with,
last
yeah. Okay, so.
I think we're good to go when you are, and we can just defer to Clay.
All right,
So
thank you.
let's not want to sit down here and use spot.
Send you a message
I
so you
can
have my
move
good.
your name tag back down there if you want to stay
You
there.
did something different. What did you do?
Well, I thought your name tag was there, but you know.
Something different to your,
I did.
thank you, what'd you do?
It's an AE levy chair.
I didn't think I needed to be here for that.
That one,
I already signed one.
you get to keep one
Oh.
unless you don't care.
I got it.
Because I studied it while I didn't have
All right, 6:30 and we're ready to resume.
Thank you.
We're now going to go through the consent agenda. And does anybody have anything they want to add or change?
I do not.
So, somebody make a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I'll make a motion that we approve the consent agenda.
I'll second that. Do we need to identify ourselves when the motions are made? Because it's or will you do that?
I think it would be good, since it's a new commission, for the transcriber to go ahead and state your name when you're making a motion for this evening.
Malachi made the motion.
And Les Poole seconded.
And, I guess it's approved then,
We
right?
need to,
Well, technically.
Oh, let's
Okay,
take
all those
a,
in favor?
shall we go by name, or you want to call a roll, or should we just all?
You do not need to do a roll call on this item. You can do an all in favor.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None? Consent agenda passes. So now, we're ready for our regular agenda. The public hearing is now open for the purpose of considering, item Z 0635-16C, conditional use marijuana facility in existing building, indoor grow site along with retail sales on property located at 17763 82nd Drive, zoned light industrial. Mitch Killian. This item was postponed from January 17th due to weather. And the procedure we'll follow tonight is the planning department report, applicant testimony, proponent testimony, opponent testimony, applicant rebuttal, decision to continue or close the hearing, planning commission discussion, and decision. Now, does any commissioner wish to disqualify himself or herself for any personal or financial interest in this matter before us tonight, or does any commission member wish to report any significant ex parte or pre-hearing contacts? Please indicate if you have visited the site in connection with this application. So let's just start down on the end.
Yep, I do, and I was trying to learn more about the project, so I made a number of things. I wrote it down. I'm just going to read it, if that's okay. It's Dennis McCarty.
Name for the transcriber.
Dennis McCarty. I would like to disclose the following ex parte contacts. I downloaded information from the internet regarding the history of how the industry started under federal and state law in the states of Colorado, Washington, and Oregon. And based on the Gladstone Commission agenda dated 1/17/2017, I had some questions regarding Fire Marshal Mike Funk's comments. I had a brief conversation with Fire Marshal Funk regarding the areas which were to be occupied within the building and the parking spots allocated. It was neither clear to me, or I understood it was not clear to him either at that time. So to paraphrase Marshal Funk's response, as I believe I heard it, he had not been able to inspect the interior of the building at that time, and we also discussed the conditional use supplemental application submitted by the applicant, Jeremy Lumachi, and property owner Mitch Killian, in which it states the building has its own 20-space parking. After that, I read comments by Jeremy Lumachi dated 1/9/2017, in which he states that the current tenant is moving out and that satisfies the parking requirements under the code, from his statement. I had a brief conversation with Police Chief Jolly regarding how many police officers were currently on staff. I was considering how things might affect the community as far as staff. I spoke with Clay briefly, who I believe is considered staff, but I want to make clear that I asked for clarification on what part of the building was being used in what way. And on January 23rd, I attended the Clackamas County Planning Commission public meeting, which had an agenda item entitled Marijuana Updates, to learn how the county was addressing this topic. I went on record and announced my presence and that I was there to learn what they had accomplished so far regarding the marijuana land use laws and regulations. I introduced myself to Mike McAllister without further discussion, and notwithstanding these contacts, I will be able to render an impartial decision in the matter.
Commissioner Smith, I drove past the location just to verify that I was certain where it was.
Malachi, I have been to the location. Also, I was part of the team responsible for postponing it due to weather last month.
And Randy Roulette, I did visit the site, and I'm familiar with the site and read some of the state law pertaining to that was mentioned in the applicant's application.
Les Poole, I visited the site. I haven't obviously been inside the building, but I'm familiar with the location.
Libby, once I just drove by the site, I didn't pull into the driveway, but I wanted to make sure where it was too.
Chair Rowlett, can staff make a couple of observations here and even a request or two? You got started a little quicker than I thought you would. And at some point before we start the public hearing, you should have a just set of guidelines to read regarding process. It should be in there.
I think we're down to ex parte item 3 on the cheat sheet here.
Okay. Well, then second, we've got 3 items on the agenda this evening. None is more important than the other, and frankly, they're not in any particular order, except that's how they got typed up in there. What I do feel is that the conditional use will certainly take the longest. We've got also on the agenda a request for an extension of a subdivision plat, which if that takes any more than 5 or 6 minutes, we're doing something very wrong. We also have a design review application, which should be almost equally quick. And it's my suggestion or thought that we get those 2 out of the way so we can more fully concentrate on the conditional use application without having other applications hanging over our head and thinking we might have to hurry. I honestly think we can get those other 2 in and out very quickly.
Okay, I'm all good with that. I already read the, that we're starting the hearing for this one.
Yeah. So I would be fine with putting this one in abeyance, doing the other 2, and then coming back and finishing our introductory comments for that public hearing at that time.
So should I start over?
Start over with the new public hearing?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Fine with that.
For item 4.
Could we, if it's up for grabs still, could we do the plat extension first? Because honestly, that's just going to take a minute.
So that is number 4.
That would be number 4. That's Z0411-15.
So do you want me to read this whole thing over again? The public hearing is, blah, blah, blah.
That's fine. Just go ahead and announce this item and we'll get her done.
Okay, the public hearing is now open for the purpose of considering item Z0411-15-SS, request for extension of approval for 9-lot subdivision. Property is located at 710 East Kenmore, between Donnaland Way and Columbia Avenue. The original approval date of November 20th, 2015. And the procedure we follow for this and all public hearings for land use are Planning Department report, applicant testimony, proponent testimony, opponent testimony, applicant rebuttal, decision to continue or close the hearing, Planning Commission discussion and decision. Now, does any commission member wish to disqualify himself or herself for any personal or financial interest in this matter before us tonight? Or does any commissioner wish to report any significant ex parte or pre-hearing contacts? Please indicate if you visited the site in connection with this application. So let's start again down on the end and work our way through.
I have none.
Commissioner Smith, I have not.
I visited during the original application.
I have not visited, nor am I familiar with this application. I was not on the Planning Commission at that time.
I was in the original process and have been there in the past, but not recently.
Libby once, and nothing.
Does any member of the audience wish to challenge the right of any commission member to hear this matter? Is there any member of the audience who wishes to question the jurisdiction of this body to act on behalf of the City Council in this matter? Oregon land use laws require that all issues be raised if the issues are to be appealed. Failure to raise the issues at this hearing may invalidate their further appeal to the Land Use Board of Appeals, LUBA. Any party has the right to request a continuance of this hearing or, in the alternative, to have the record left open for 7 days. Failure to raise constitutional or other issues relating to proposed conditions of approval with sufficient specificity to allow the Commission to respond to the issue will preclude an action for damages in circuit court. If you're going to testify, please try to address the applicable criteria. Will staff please read?
You give them a chance to.
Sorry?
You were asking them if anybody wanted to.
Oh, sorry. Anybody have anything they want to add to that? Challenge? No?
Seeing none.
So, let's see, will the staff please present the report?
Okay, so this is a subdivision that two of you were here for, I think. Yep. It was approved in November 20th, 2015, as mentioned, a 9-lot subdivision of Kenmore and Donna Lynn Way. One of the conditions, of which there were many, one being that the final plat be submitted to the city for review within 12 months of that approval date. That did not happen. It's been submitted now, but it was after the 12-month time period had expired. The Gladstone Municipal Code, Title 17, provides for an extension, one extension of a 1-year time period. The reason in this case for delay, there's multiple reasons, all in my mind quite valid, and the fact that it is in now and we're working on it, I think should also speak well for this request. The original applicant is here, Casey Cutting, and that's it for the staff report. Unless you have any questions, this one's pretty straightforward.
There was a comment in here that the city changed their mind. Do you know what that was about?
Can you point the comment out to me?
It's the last sentence of the second paragraph.
On what document?
We only have the one email.
Yeah.
Is it from me?
It's from Casey to you.
Yeah, right here.
And redesign the entire storm sewer system after the city changed their mind on how they wanted the storm sewer built, which delayed the project.
Do you know what that's about?
Yeah, why don't we let Casey address that? Okay. He wrote the email.
Hi. So that comment was referring to the way that the Sissel Engineering, who does the reviews for the improvements, had indicated in the pre-application meeting we had one potential design, and they decided after the fact that they preferred a different method of stormwater retention, and so my civil engineer had to redesign the improvement, the engineering design for all the street improvements several times. And so that held things up, as well as there was a 140-foot long section of Kenmore Street, East Kenmore, that was vacated, and that also delayed things, as well as during the middle of all this I had a stroke last year. So that's all I have.
Okay.
But to the question of redesign, that was an engineering issue.
It was just
You're not
engineering
changing
issue.
the subdivision
Oh,
number
no,
of
not
lots,
at all.
size of lots.
Not a bit. It's just the engineering for the improvements. Yeah.
Do those modifications affect the application at all?
No, it's the same number of lots, same size, shape, same road. It's engineering and it's underground. Frankly, what's changed.
Questions?
Real straightforward.
So shall we move on to? So now is the time for public testimony.
Thank you, Casey.
Thank you. Please approach the podium and state your name and address. We will first hear testimony of proponents, that is from people who support the application. Then we will hear testimony from opponents. So anybody wish to testify? For? Against? All right. No rebuttal is necessary. Any further comments from the applicant? If there's no testimony, I will entertain a motion to either close the public hearing or continue it to a date certain. What is the pleasure of the commission?
Mr. Malachi, I'll make a motion that we close the public hearing.
Commissioner McCarty, I second it.
The person seconded.
First and second, and
All in favor?
the hearing's closed.
No, you can do the all in favor.
Oh, do we have to call roll?
You don't have to call roll though.
All those or in favor, aye, opposed, nay.
One at a time.
Okay. In favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
No.
And the hearing is closed. So what is the pleasure of the commission?
So, I would just like to point out, mostly for Clay's benefit, that while we have been asking that the extensions be filed prior to the expiration, that we started doing that after this application was created, and that wasn't part of their application, right?
Correct.
I think we should approve it. Looks like they're making a lot of progress on it, and we need to get it done. So.
This is Commissioner Smith. I'd like to make a motion that we approve Z0411-15-SS for the extension.
Commissioner Wentz, seconds.
Any discussion?
I would just add, this is pretty straightforward, and obviously the reasons seem real legitimate, so I'm fine with it.
So let's have a voice. Those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None opposed. The motion passes.
Yes. Bang the gavel.
All right. So we're ready for which one you want to do next?
Well, if it was up to me, I would go with the design review application for the change of restaurant to a car sales yard. Also very straightforward.
All right. Do I have to read this whole thing again? So I read the whole, okay. The public hearing is now open for the purpose of considering public hearing Z0048-17-D, design review, change of use to auto sales from restaurant, McLaughlin at Glen Echo, 19120 Southeast McLaughlin Boulevard. The procedure we will follow tonight is Planning Department report, applicant testimony, proponent testimony, opponent testimony, applicant rebuttal, decision to continue or close the public hearing, Planning Commission discussion and decision. Does any member wish to disqualify himself or herself for any personal or financial interest in this matter before us tonight, or does any commission member wish to report any significant ex parte or pre-hearing contacts? Please indicate if you visited the site in connection with this application. So let's start at the end and just work our way down again.
Commissioner McCarty, I did visit the site. I've eaten there lots of times.
Commissioner Smith, same.
This is Malachi. I have not, but I am familiar with the area.
Randy Roulette, I've been there many times and very familiar with the site.
Les Poole, I also am real familiar with the site and have been there many times.
Libby Wentz, I'm familiar with this site, but did not go and look at it specifically for this.
Okay. Does any member of the audience wish to challenge the right of any commissioner to hear this matter? Is there any member of the audience who wishes to question the jurisdiction of this body to act on behalf of the City Council in this matter? Oregon land use laws require that all issues be raised if the issues are to be appealed. Failure to raise the issues at this hearing may invalidate their further appeal to the Land Use Board of Appeals, LUBA. Any party has the right to request continuance of this hearing or, an alternative, to have the record left open for 7 days. Failure to raise constitutional or other issues relating to proposed conditions of approval with significant specificity to allow the Commission to respond to the issue or preclude an action for damages in circuit court. If you're going to testify, please try to address the applicable criteria. Will staff please present the report?
Okay, I will be brief. This is a design review application. Design review is a process applied to, in this case, a use allowed outright. The property is on McLaughlin at Glen Echo and Mildred Street. So just kind of an odd-shaped wedge, about 1.5 acres in size, with a building on it and a big sign that says T-Bows. It's been there a real long time. I remember eating there as a kid, and I'm not a kid anymore. The proposal at this time is to convert the use on site from restaurant to an auto sales yard, an auto sales lot. Site changes as proposed currently will be minimal. The building will remain, the parking area will remain, the landscape areas will remain. It's the use that will change. The parking lot on the south end of the building, the largest area of parking there, will be converted to display of inventory. Still parked cars, but for sale cars. Customers and staff will park on the north side there. The building itself, as I say, as I understand the application, is to remain essentially the same. There's going to be a roll-up door added in order to allow bringing vehicles inside for display. There's going to be some interior work done to the offices and whatnot. But basically the site and the building are going to pretty much look the way they do now. It's just the use occurring on site and in that building that will change. The current use of restaurant is allowed outright. The proposed use of auto sales lot yard is allowed outright. When doing staff report, it's a challenge in this case when everything's kind of staying the same to try to apply Title 17 to this, particularly the building design standards, the site design standards. Everything's already designed. Even the landscaping's there and mature. So I did kind of battle my way through. Hopefully you did the same, reading through. But basically what you've got is a general commercial zone, a use allowed outright in the general commercial zone on a property that's fully developed and is not going to be developed differently. It's the use that's changing. And I recommend that you approve this. There's a few conditions that I added. Sent out notice. I did receive comments back, and I always like to mention those, so let me take a look here. I also somehow got here this evening without my glasses, so hopefully you'll be kind to me on that. We got comments from Jim Wynot from Public Works. Says no issues from Public Works. It's an existing building / lot with city services. We don't see any need for change based on proposed use. Oak Lodge commented. This is from Marcus Mead, very long kind of boilerplate comment. But summary, as a condition of land use approval, Oak Lodge Service District requests the property owner be required to comply with requirements and to procure the necessary approvals and/or permits from Service District in accordance with code, regulations, and policies. No other comments were received.
So I do have 2 comments on your recommendation.
Mm-hmm.
On number 1, we would like to add the wording regarding that they have to get the extension prior to the expiration.
Excuse me, where can you cite where it is, just so I can...
recommendation number 1 of yours, we talk about getting the extension. And I just want to add that boilerplate that we've been doing for getting it before the expiration.
Okay.
And then I believe number 15 and number 7 are actually the same item.
So number 4, which is the site lighting, I think
No, number 7 and number 15.
Signs. 15. And I'd like to point out on that note that Commissioner McCarty pointed out that there's a cut-paste error on page 5-8 of your stack under the recommendation, which states to approve the recommend to approve the specific design review application for the retail liquor store. We're not approving a retail liquor store here. This is a car lot, and that just got lifted from the previous decision. So that's been changed and will not be in any decision. Also, one other typo. On some of the staff reports, it cites the hearing date as February 14th. Not sure why that happened. It might just be because it's my favorite day of the year, but it's actually February 21st, so I've changed that already.
Anybody else, comments, questions? Staff? For staff? Okay. Is the applicant or his or her representative present? Do you wish to add anything to the staff report? Okay.
Well, we actually do have questions for them, right? So.
Do we have questions?
Yeah. Can we have them come?
We do have some questions. So could you please come to the podium? Please give your name and address for the record.
Sarah Barami, and 1115 Lakefront Road, Lake Oswego.
And I'm Sammy Vade, same address as well.
Okay.
I had some questions regarding the plan for the lighting and signage out in the parking lot itself. How is that going to be updated?
Says we obviously want to go with code. There is no prior structure as far as lighting outside, but whatever it is to make it up to code, we're more than happy to do so.
Well, are you planning on, I mean, with the cars out there, are you planning on increasing the lights out there for security and things?
Yes, sir, for security purposes.
Okay. And what about signage? Are you planning on making...
We're just replacing the old signage that's on there. We're not going to be adding any form of signage at all.
Okay.
So whatever is on the pre-existing is what we're going to be using.
Just changing it.
Anybody have any questions?
Are these new vehicles or used vehicles?
They're pre-owned vehicles.
Pre-owned, okay.
Yes, ma'am.
About the lighting, but the lighting will be restricted, so it won't be going outside of...
Absolutely. So our biggest concern is obviously it's close to the residential. We want to stay as... We have 2 dealerships already down the street, and one's close to the residential, and when we did lighting over there, our biggest concern was to make sure the lighting wouldn't go in the neighbor's yard or anything like that. So the only reason for the lighting is for the security of our vehicles. Other than that, we respect our residents, and that's our #1 priority. So if a little bit down the street where the rock shop is, I mean, we have a dealership right there, and there's residents there, and we have lighting, and when we first designed it, we made sure exactly the angle, so it wouldn't go in anybody's yard, wouldn't bother anybody.
Okay, thank you.
My pleasure.
Where is that lot? You said you had 2 other lots. Are they located here in Gladstone?
Yes, I guess they're considered Milwaukee.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
And
you
where?
know where the new Walmart is?
Yes.
Right across the street.
Okay.
And then when you go down, there's a rock shop.
I know where that one's located.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
That's
What is the name of that dealer?
The Cars Planet.
Okay,
CRZ
yeah, I see
Planet.
that, sure.
Yes, sir.
And that will be the name also here in the Gladstone location? Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Anything else?
That's all I have. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Appreciate your time.
Now's the time for public testimony. Please approach the podium and state your name and address. We'll first hear testimony from proponents. Anybody who wish to testify in favor of the application? Then we will hear testimony from opponents. Any opponents to the application wish to testify, please come to the podium and state your name and address for the record.
My name is Doug Cornoyer. I'm a resident of 18822 Southeast Mildred Street, and my question is concerning the lighting issue with the lot that I'm just right behind it. So any lighting that goes toward my house, I'm probably not too keen on it because rooms face that side part of the parking lot. So my concern is traffic and lighting.
Is there any kind of buffer between you guys, trees or anything like that?
Yeah, I do have a laurel hedge. Okay. That the way the lights are right now, it just kind of beams over that. So I don't know how much light is going to come into my yard because the hedge was 30 feet and I cut it back down to 10. So it was an obstruction for a while, but I got rid of that, and now it's obviously opened more light to my house. And I was also thinking for future use, I don't know if it could be a commission issue now at this time, but if this car lot doesn't continue, or I see so many car lots coming in and out of that street. And I'm just wondering how long this car lot's going to, longevity of it, how long it's going to be there, or what kind of hearing it's going to be for the next use of the property.
Is that something you know the answer to, as far as if it changed again, does it have to come before us again?
Yes. Yeah, I mean, we have no way of knowing if this business is going to succeed there, but any change of use would be coming back, and you'd get notice again. Okay. And to the light question, I added, and because you brought it up, I want to bring it up again. I added some language to that condition. It says any new on-site lighting shall comply with yada yada yada. Dark sky fixtures shall be used to the extent possible. That means they not supposed to shine out into space. And I've added a paragraph there, or a phrase, and to avoid light spillover to adjoining properties. So I've added that condition. They have to submit, as a condition, if this is approved, they have to submit a site lighting plan for review, and we'll just have our engineering department take a look at it. And they're basically like contour maps. They show lumens and how far they go out, so it can get pretty detailed.
And how do I receive a copy of that?
You should contact me.
Oh.
Yeah, because it's all public record, but it'd be quickest if you contact me because I'll know where it is.
Okay.
Traffic, as used car lot by, per the IT manual, generates approximately 1/5 the traffic that a restaurant does. So, per square foot, it's going to be much less traffic, for whatever that's worth. It'll be different traffic, but it'll be much less traffic.
Because there's not a lot of traffic in Tebow's. It's really declining.
Well, and that may be why we're here this evening.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. I'd like to say one thing, Dennis McCarty. On the lighting issue, it should be really clear. The map he's talking about, the plot that's going to show the lighting layout.
Yep.
They show the cutoffs, and the state code for these car lots are very clear about how much light spillage you can have, and what the limits of them are. And the light pollution in the up direction is specifically in Gladstone is forbidden. But be aware, from past experience, there's a lot of light there regardless of how much they drive it in towards the center of the property. You still have to deal with a certain amount of that. And they will, I'm assuming, having security lighting on their buildings, which would also have to be restricted as well, as far as leaving the property or line of sight, as far as directly aimed at something. I don't recall exactly, but I believe that most properties, when they light something like a parking lot, or those are restricted to like a 1/4 of a foot candle at the property's edge, if it's done properly. But that's roughly the equivalent of full moon on a clear night. So you're going to get light.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure you're clear of that you can't restrict everything that they're doing. As long as I make every effort to try to keep it contained.
Because, the car lot part of it is going to be on the other side of Tebow's. So my concern is on the other side of the building, the little wedge is where the light spillage may occur. So I don't know how much lighting they're going to do
on the plan
for employee parking.
Right, but we may want to bring the applicant back up to answer that.
Okay, thank you. Now it's time for...
Well,
we need to ask.
He called him back up.
applicant rebuttal.
Could you repeat the question? Sorry, one more time. It was a little hard to hear back there.
Okay, now's the time for applicant rebuttal. Do you, have any comments or anything you wish to address?
Yeah, I think the specific concern here, you've got, the building, you got the large parking area on the south side, and then the wedgy portion up on the north.
Right.
What's that gonna be used for? Is that for employee and customer parking mostly?
Right.
And what's the lighting gonna be like on that portion of the property? You gonna have, overhead and security lighting and that kind of thing?
We're just gonna, on the north side, you're referring to as the north side.
Right.
So that's gonna be the customer parking and employee parking, and then the lighting is gonna be the same as what's gonna be on the other side. So I actually, when he was talking, I wanted to speak out. At our new dealership where we have the indoor showroom, these new lights we have don't actually, the LED lights, they're not the floodlights. So when you do the floodlights, you actually have a more 360 view. With these new LED lights, it's like a little pole with code. They go up and it's just single down. So it just views the cars individually, and it maybe does 3 or 4 cars at one time. So it's not the floodlights that you'll see that will go all the way to the neighbor's yard or anywhere like that. So these LED lights are designed this way. They're a little bit more expensive, but they're designed like that so that it's more restricted in the sense that it stays in the zone that you're trying to protect. And to add on what I didn't state in the last comment was that more lighting is actually more security for the area as well. I mean, I was talking to Craig as well, one of the owners of Tebow's, and there have been break-ins, here and there, and I've been on McLaughlin for a while, and I know there are a little bit of crime that goes on. With more lighting, this actually adds improvement to the neighborhood, adding more security for not only the dealership, but for all residentials living nearby.
But I also want to reassure our neighbors that we are a family-owned business. This is my son, and we are trying to I just want to reassure all the neighbors that we're not going to do something to bother our neighborhood, we're trying to bring more jobs and just moving from that dealership from that side to this side. So as far as lighting or whatever issue that they have, we all go with the city code. That's our purpose.
And you have purchased or in the works of purchasing that piece of property?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any further testimony? None?
No.
Oh, Mike.
When you get into your next level, where you're discussing.
Okay, if there's no further testimony, I will entertain a motion to either close the public hearing or continue to a date certain. What is the pleasure of the commission?
So, did you want to come up during the public or during the public hearing?
Maybe I should.
That'd probably be better.
Okay.
Maybe I should. I just had a couple of simple questions, I think. Mike Funk, Fire Marshal for the City of Gladstone. I apologize. I don't remember seeing this until somebody told me that they're putting a car lot where Tebow's was, and I heard that word of mouth. I can't find in here the paperwork talks about the roll-up door, but my question is like number 2 under recommendations where it says the applicant shall attain required building permits. Is that what it's referring to? I assume if they're cutting out a wall and putting in a roll-up door, it's certainly going to require permits and inspection.
Well, I think there'll be a whole series of permits because they're going to be doing quite a bit of interior work too, and how much of that is load bearing? Well, it's all commercial, so yes, there definitely will be building permits.
Okay. On number 10, it says the applicant submit a letter to the city from the fire department, indication all requirements of the agency have been satisfied. So, what is? Help me out with understanding that just a little bit.
Well, that's boilerplate language that I lifted from another jurisdiction that I use to make absolutely certain that the fire district is plugged in and nothing can happen until the fire district is okay with it. Now, I can reword that. I could remove it if you'd want, because this is not an approval criterion. This is more an informational condition.
Okay.
But it does give a handle to the fire department.
And that's what I was looking for. I do like the way that's fine. I just wanted to see if there was something different. I hadn't seen this particular boilerplate before.
I think it's fairly new.
And I think that this is the relationship that we're developing between our city agencies and the county now having exactly this type of stuff in, where it's protecting our interests and stuff like that. So that is doing exactly what I had hoped it was. And that is all of my questions, unless you have a question for me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. If there's no further testimony, I will entertain a motion to either close the public hearing or continue to a date certain. What is the pleasure of the commission?
I make a motion that we close the public hearing.
All in favor?
You need a second. I'll second that first. Les Poole, I'll second that.
In favor?
You should.
Aye.
Well, aye.
Aye.
So you want to do discussion after that?
You know we should do the discussion before we do.
Any discussion before we do the voice? None?
Okay.
In
I don't have any.
favor?
Do you have any?
Aye.
Opposed? The motion passes. And
So now we need
now,
to resume the other one.
sorry?
Now we need to go back to number 3.
Okay. Now we're going to do another public hearing.
Excuse me, I have a question. As a new person, so that's it now, it goes to the next, we're finished with this for right now, it goes
For
to the
that
next one, okay.
Thanks for bearing with me as I get this going.
You'll get there.
So Ashley, do we need to start number 3 over, or can we just continue from the one we started earlier?
You know, I'm going to ask you if you could just start it over. So,
Okay.
well, I'm sorry, let's start after, because we had substantial disclosures of ex parte contacts. So I'm going to revise that. Let's
Before
start.
we do that, I see we have a number 6 down here. Should we wait till the end or go ahead
No,
and...
that's from staff.
Okay, never mind.
Me. Me.
So I'm going to ask the city recorder if she could follow the, holding the original public meeting in abeyance and picking up from where we left off after the ex parte disclosures. Would that be okay on your end, Jackie?
Yes, that would be fine.
Okay. So I would reconvene that public hearing, start at, so announce the public hearing by name, or by number and name, and say this is a continuation, list out the, what we've already done, and then start.
Okay. So right now, we're going to reconvene the public hearing for conditional use of a marijuana facility number Z0635-16C. Marijuana facility in existing building, indoor grow site along with retail sales on property located at 17763 82nd Drive, industrial Maxillian. It was postponed from January 17th due to weather. We already did the notification for public testimony, how it works, the procedures of the hearing, and we're down to, we did ex parte contact. So does any member of the audience wish to challenge the right of any commission member to hear this matter? Is there any member of the audience who wishes to question the jurisdiction of this body to act on behalf of the city council in this matter? Seeing none. These laws require that all issues be raised. If issues are appealed, failure to raise the issues of this hearing may invalidate their further appeal to the Land Use Court of Appeals, LUBA. Any party has the right to request a continuance of this hearing or an alternative to have the record left open for 7 days. Failure to raise constitutional or other issues relating to proposed conditions of approval with sufficient specificity to allow the commission to respond to this issue will preclude an action for damages in circuit court. If you're going to testify, please try to address the applicable criteria. Will staff please present the report?
Yeah, well, I didn't realize how large those were going to be when I plotted them, so if you only need one and can share, that's fine. But what I did is I had Jackie pass out aerial photos showing the subject property along with the area that I thought was of interest here. And also of interest is I think we need to just kind of create a little bit of a record here, so I'm going to be a little bit slower with this staff report. So last November, the voters rejected ballot measure 3-481, The effect being that it lifted the ban on certain activities related to marijuana. City Council then adopted ordinance number 1470, which modified the Gladstone Municipal Code at Chapter 17 to allow certain activities associated with marijuana. They specifically limited it to the light industrial zone. He's also got other limitations from the state level and the city level, most particularly buffers from schools and certain other public areas. It didn't really show up as well as I'd hoped on the aerial, but I've got buffers on there. Those are the arcs that are showing up, and you can see that this property happens to both be in the light industrial zone and outside of any restricted buffer area. So this is an application which proposes a grow in that building that's shown there, and future retail sales of marijuana. It's, as I mentioned, it's outside of any identified buffers, and that, at first glance anyway, otherwise appears to meet applicable standards. I should point out that the way the code was amended, the way the land use ordinance was amended to allow this, subsequent to the vote, really narrowed where these can go. I've come up with a total of 3 properties in the city of Gladstone that are zoned light industrial and that are not in a buffer. You've only got a couple of little areas of light industrial. You've got the one along Portland Avenue, which happens to be right next to a high school, so that buffer just wipes all those out. And you've got this one here on Old 82nd, that the buffers don't quite reach 2 properties. They happen to be the last 2 properties in Gladstone before you fall off the edge of the earth into unincorporated Clackamas County. So this is one of probably a total of 3 properties in the city where this can even happen. Where this application can even be made. Alright, so the property, 17763 Southeast 82nd Drive. The underlying zoning is light industrial. Comprehensive plan designation is industrial. Property is about 1/3 of an acre in size. It's on the west side of 82nd, as you can see there, right at Hanson Court. There's a warehouse, there's an industrial type building on there. It was constructed in 97 and 98. It was properly permitted as an industrial building at that time. It's had a variety of uses over the years, and frankly, like most of the buildings along that strip along 82nd Drive are more commercial in nature than industrial, but your light industrial zone happens to allow uses that are allowed in your general commercial zone. And commercial typically generates more per square foot, so you're always going to get commercial if you allow that in your industrial zones. But regardless, this is the light industrial zone in an area of mixed light industrial and commercial type uses. This proposal is for a mix of light industrial and commercial uses. It's an indoor grow with future retail sales. As I understand it, and the applicant is here to represent himself, but as I understand it, there's no processing per se involved here. It's simply growing and at some point selling marijuana. This is a conditional use. It's different than, frankly, what you typically look at, which is design review, subdivisions, those kind of things. Those are usually already allowed. You're just looking at design standards and whatnot. Conditional uses are discretionary. They're yes or no. And the approval criteria, the review criteria, are quite specific, and I want to go through those. They are 5. Number 1 is the use has to be listed as a conditional use in a light industrial zone. This one is, as amended by council. Number 2, it needs to be shown that the site is suitable for the proposed use considering size, shape, location, topography, existence of improvements, and natural features. And I've gone through some discussion there. I won't read through all that, but this one I think we need to think about for a minute. Number 3, you've got to show the use. The applicant needs to show the use is timely, considering the adequacy of transportation systems, public facilities and services existing or planned for the area affected by the use. This is along Old Southeast 82nd. All improvements are in place. Stormwater, sanitary sewer, the roads are there, sidewalks. It's how the infrastructure is there. That criterion is met. The 4th one, It must be shown that it will not alter the character of the surrounding area in a manner which substantially limits, impairs, or precludes the use of surrounding properties for the primary uses listed in the underlying zoning district. As I mentioned, this is in a light industrial zone. That's what's allowed, in addition to commercial uses. That's what's occurring on all these properties in that strip of light industrial zoning. That's what's proposed. From that standpoint, I don't see how this would alter that pattern. In fact, it will become part of an existing pattern. It should fit in there nicely. And then the fifth one, it has to satisfy comprehensive plan policies which apply to proposed use. As mentioned, this is planned in industrial. Your comprehensive plan is old, but it does have policies at work here that provide for specifically mixed-use commercial industrial type activities, which is what's proposed here. Sent out notice, received comments on this, and I did want to go through those. Got comments from Jim Wynot, Public Works again. Kind of sounds like the other one. No issues from Public Works. It's an existing building with city services, and we don't see any need for change based on proposed use. Gladstone PD, Jeff Jolly commented, along with some notes from Sean Boyle. It was a discussion of previous nefarious activity on the site, and frankly, I didn't include it in this because I don't know how it applies. I received extensive comments from the fire district, and hopefully you got copies of those comments. Luckily, Mr. Funk is here this evening. Generally, the discussion is talking about fire code and building code, which, though obviously important, is not one of the decision criteria. It's this with a conditional use is typically conditioned. They, must satisfy fire department and building department with regards to theirs. Also, in this case, this is an industrial. It's a block building, and it didn't even occur to me that this would come up. But I'm glad Mike is here because he can discuss his concerns on this because they are valid. I received 2 phone calls, which I think were from 2 different people, neighbors to the north. And that's where I wanted to spend just a minute on discussion, and that's under my B, and under conclusions. 1 sub B, the is suitable, considering size, shape, location, topography, etc. The area is right at the edge of town. Everything south of it on that side of the road is zoned light industrial and is occupied with light industrial or commercial uses. Everything north of it, across the narrow little Hanson Court there, is just this ocean of houses. It's residential. It's outside your jurisdiction because it's unincorporated Clackamas County, but it is physically there. So the 2 neighbors I talked to who apparently live there had questions. They didn't voice specific opposition for whatever that's worth. They were mostly, one asked about hours of operation and one asked about security lighting. But I did want to mention that because I told them I would, and I'm not sure if they're here tonight. I don't know that they are, so I'm glad I said it. But otherwise, after going through the conditional use criteria, which, as I say, are different than what you're used to looking at, frankly, comparing it to what I understood the City Council's intent, along with what the voters approved, I recommend approval. It simply meets the criteria. If we can add to the findings about suitability, particularly with regards to the residential uses to the north. And, as I mentioned, I've been driving up and down Old 82nd since 20 years before that building was even there. But since the building has been there's been just all sorts of businesses going on in there. And as far as I know, there's been no complaints filed about any of them. And there really has been kind of a wide variety of things happening in there. This new use has been determined to be legal, at least at the state and local level, and allowed in the zone with this conditional use review. So with that and since I'm starting to wander, I'll stop. And if you have any questions, let me know.
I have 2 comments for you, Clay. So on recommendation number 2, again, we want to add the before the expiration comment in there. And on your conclusion, 1A, I found the wording to be a little confusing because...
Hang on. Sorry, I just want to make sure I get your... Okay, 1... So under recommendation...
No, in the conclusion 1A?
Conclusion.
I found the wording to be a little confusing because the measure didn't actually remove a ban. It was a measure... The measure itself was the ban, and it got rejected, right?
The measure was the ban.
Yeah.
And the measure was...
Not to remove the ban, but rejecting the measure failed to implement a ban.
Well, there was a ban in place. The city opted
expired,
to...
Right?
Right.
The measure was to impose a ban,
Yeah.
and the measure did not pass.
Yeah.
Oh, so I got it backwards.
Yeah.
So, just for my understanding, you know, we had the Seal State vote, we also had thumbs up and all that, and then a lot of the jurisdictions, including Gladstone, decided to put everything on hold, you know, to wait. So that ban was not what got lifted by this ballot measure?
I think that ban had a moratorium on it, right?
So,
Yes.
in order for the ban to be valid under 475B, it had to be affirmed by the voters. So essentially what you had between when you passed your ordinance and when the voters, you know, made their will known was, gosh, the word is slipping my mind, but essentially the OLCC and the OHA could not issue permits, could not issue licenses or registrations during that period. So it was a de facto ban during that period that had to be affirmed by the voters. But as Commissioner Malachi said, because the voters did not affirm the ban never took place.
So if we could just make sure the wording
Yeah.
in this is correct.
No, I know, I definitely need to reword that because I had it elsewise, so thank you for pointing that out. Basically, the voters of Gladstone approved certain activities related to marijuana. That's, we all agree on that. Okay.
I had a couple of questions. Commissioner McCarty, sorry about the cold. I spoke with you a couple of times regarding this, and I also talked to Fire Marshal Funk back there. A couple of the things that I was really not clear on, and I've got a number of questions, but if you could just address some of these things. On the drawings, it really isn't clear whether you're going to occupy what part for retail down below or up above, how much is going to be the grow space, and the density of that grow.
So that
There's
should...
not time for that.
Yeah, that should wait until they come up.
So right now, if we have any questions of staff
Yeah.
to clarify anything in the report, we'll do that now.
I would actually like to have Mike come up.
Thank you, I was going to suggest that.
Mike Funk, Fire Marshal for the City of Gladstone.
Did you see the reply to your comments?
I saw that tonight.
You got a chance to review
I received it about a week ago, I think, is when it was sent out to us, and I did not catch that until tonight. It answers some of the questions that I have. I think that there's still some questions out there, and I'm not understand that I'm not so much. This is a land use. I'm not arguing about land use. Should it? Shouldn't it? That's just a business owner to me, you know.
Yeah.
And I support businesses in Gladstone. My question is do we go through and approve and jump through all the hoops if the building isn't suitable? And what I got from a 19-year-old building, I did not have the date originally that it was a 1998 building. I question if the building was suitable with electrical and ventilation and that type of stuff required. When it talked in their original application that they were going to be doing sales and production, my question was, does production mean extracting as well? And I do have that answer in here. It's good. There's a whole new set of rules which they kind of alluded to also, I think, in this, and that's not what they were requesting. But
and they did mention the electrician too. So the question I have for you, based on your concerns that you had, a lot of them appear to have been answered. What outstanding issues are you concerned about?
I've heard two different things. Are they using the whole building, which is what I see here? And the tenants that I talked to is going, no, we're not moving. We're doing business. Now, I guess that's between Mr. Killian and them. But the drawing that I saw, the way I put it together and the way I looked at my pre-fire plan was one half of the upstairs, the other half of the upstairs. Are we in fact using 2 floors?
So we'll need to get that addressed.
Not that it makes that much difference to me, but if they're, for instance, if they're going to grow, if they're bringing in, I assume, soil to grow plants, if they're irrigating the soil, my question is did a 20-year-old building, was it constructed correctly to have that kind of weight on the second floor? And see, that's where my concerns come from, because I don't want public or firefighters or the hair shop or the sound studio to have something over their head that the building wasn't constructed for. And it may be as simple as an engineer looking at the original prints and saying, yeah, it's fine. But from my perspective, I thought the question needed to be asked up front. And those are the kind of questions that I was intending to ask. Extraction, of it's not going to happen there. ADA, from what I can read, may or may not be an issue, but that's something that the county building... Clay, can you help me out? When I was reading your comments, were you saying that it's not an issue because it's pre-existing or on the ADA?
Well, everything that you're talking about is valid and it's important. It's just that specific building code and fire code does not come up through the conditional use process. It isn't a criterion for consideration. That certainly doesn't mean it's not important and shouldn't be considered. It simply isn't part of this specific process. And if let's say it's a vacant property right now, and we would put conditions must satisfy building code. We'd add fire code onto that specifically just to make sure that got caught, and then it would simply be done that way. We're kind of going a little backwards, but it'll be a change of occupancy, which is a building permit that you work through the building department on, because this is a different use, and the fire department will be invited to comment. If the building doesn't meet building or fire code, as found through that CMO process, then this use won't happen. Either that or they'll rebuild the building.
Okay.
That's because that's how important that is. I mean,
So what you're pointing out is the permits for doing that part of the process and what we're doing tonight are two completely separate processes.
Well, that's a little stark, but because it obviously all does kind of work together, and we will put conditions if this is approved that it satisfies it. But yes, you people tonight through the conditional use process are not considering building codes.
Okay.
If I may, it's a downstream process. So if this is approved, then the second set of permits will come before the city.
Okay.
And I agree with them. I understand what they say. Thank you for clarifying that for me. I do believe in my job, though, I need to put out my comments at my first available opportunity.
Sure, and we appreciate that.
I think that's only reasonable for a public official to do to a business owner that's coming in. Here's my concerns. Hopefully they can meet all that, because that's not my issue. I just felt like these need to be stated up front, and I think Clay has made it pretty clear, and legal counsel has made it pretty clear make sure that you understand, even though I have some concerns and they're legitimate, that's not part of, I guess, what you're looking at. Somebody else, I think legal counsel will probably remind you of that before they go in. So looks like in that respect then, as far as it relates to land use, I really don't have too much to say. Accessibility, I'm going to be watching that. That is kind of in our way. I went out on site, I took pictures and counted the parking spots. Again, I disagree with their numbers in their original application. There are not 20 on-site parking spots. The street can't be used for that. I think they're counting some parking spots that are directly in front of doors, which are exit ways. They can't be used. But I think Clay's probably pretty good at going over those numbers, and they probably still meet it if they're down to a single business and 4 employees and some in and out traffic. When I saw that it was retail and production both, I had assumed that it was store being opened right away. Is it correct that I'm hearing that we're going to grow now and open up retail later?
I think the applicant, once he starts
Okay.
talking, he'll talk to that, but that's my understanding as well.
Okay. All right, sir, that I've kind of expressed more than maybe you asked,
No, that's fine.
but do you have any other questions for me, I guess, that are applicable?
Questions?
Comment.
Just-
No, go
Just
ahead.
one question for you. So when you do show up there with the fire truck, do you park on 82nd or on that little corner street?
We could use either, depending on what's going on.
Okay.
If there's a little fire, or, for instance, my access down that street is imperative. That's where the FDC is for the property next door, the sprinkled property. There's a fire hydrant and a fire department connection for the warehouse right at the corner of this property. So I need to get down that court to access it for protection of the other building.
Okay.
Certainly, as well as the Killian property also.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Mike, just
Yes,
one
sir.
other thought. Are we on the same page on this, that please do not stop giving comments. This is a relatively unique process, conditional use, in that, it's not like, your stuff doesn't matter, but it isn't highlighted through this process. It's still important, and certainly through every other process we do, we need those comments. And we need them up front as soon as we can get them, because it could change the whole design of a project. So please please keep giving them to me.
Okay.
All right,
Yeah.
thanks.
Yeah, I did get that.
No, thank you very
good.
much.
Thank you, Mike.
He thought things are.
Anything else from the commission at this point? Is the applicant or is representative present?
Yes, we are.
Do you wish to add anything to the staff report? And please give your name and address for the record.
My name is Jeremy Lamachi. I live at 18558 Mandy Court in Beaverton.
Shane Hutchins, 744 Portland Avenue.
Okay.
So we just have some questions?
Do you want to do a presentation of any type, or?
I don't.
Okay. So you don't want to add anything to the staff report. Commission?
Yeah, so let's go and talk about a couple of the things that were asked. The timeline thing, as far as, the growing versus opening for retail, what is the plan and how does that fit into what we're doing?
So we have it is the 2 spaces upstairs. That was one of the questions, I believe, as well as the 2 units upstairs. The one to the, I believe it's the west, is available to us now. So we could start production of horticulture growing plants in there when we get licensed. And then the other side, we hold the pre-lease for that space as well, but we can't move in there until June because the beauty salon is moving out, and the people that are in that spot are moving downstairs, and then that space and everything that comes with it will be ours as well.
So then, in terms of the parking spaces, I noticed there were like 4 per business at the site, right? There's 4 for the one on the left, 4 for the one up top, and then 3 on the side and 1 on the front for the other business, right? So which of those spots are you actually going to have ownership of?
So we'll have the 4 along the northern section of the parking lot, 1 on the eastern, 1 on, I guess, the west side, and then the public parking thing with the street, if those are available. I didn't know that obviously you couldn't count that, but it is available parking, so that's what I thought with the 20 that I put in the original application. Without that, it's like 4 and 4, 4, and then the handicapped, and another one that's by the Auto Tech's front door. So it's about 15 total.
Oh, so there's
15 available parking spots.
But those are not all going to be for your business, right?
They're not, no.
So the ones that are actually available for your business, because they have, if they didn't have signs there saying only for this business, I think we could count those as a possible use. But the fact that each one is labeled saying only for this use,
right?
You'll be towed if you're using, for this other business.
The eight parking spots, then if we, the ones that we can put a sign on that are ours would be
Yeah,
8.
8, okay.
Which I believe satisfies the parking spots per square foot
And so
for
that would be the
retail.
ones on the north side,
Yeah.
right, and which other ones?
The 4 on the north, and then the 4 on the west and the 4 on the north, yeah.
4 on the west and the 4 on the
Yep.
north.
I was actually just talking with Mitch about this today.
So you're taking over all the ones from one of the other businesses?
Right.
Which of the two businesses?
Iron Tribe.
Iron Tribe.
So those are the ones that are currently upstairs,
Yeah,
right?
and they're moving downstairs.
So which of the businesses downstairs are giving up their
The
parking
beauty
spots?
salon is leaving.
But Iron Tribe is going downstairs.
Right.
Are
So
they
they're
gonna
going
have
to take
8 parking
over
spots?
the 3 spots in the front of
Next
where the
to the
beauty salon is
handicapped.
currently.
Okay, so they're taking over the ones next to the handicap spot.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
But you won't have the one piece of the lease until sometime in June, correct? So at this present time, you'd only have 4.
I've signed the lease. It is ours. I have that document here.
Okay.
So when we do open up our retail store, that will be our parking as well.
Okay.
So
I apologize for
the Iron
interrupting.
Tribe will have 3 spaces,
Right.
right?
Yep.
And the tech store, will they still have 4?
No, they have this one right in front of their door.
Yeah.
And then he said that he allows them 2 others on the side because there's that.
For the garbage can.
If you've driven by, you've seen that. If you're on that little court, there's that
Yeah.
big white truck by the driveway that's always there. I guess Mitch was telling me today that 6 months out of the year he parks that over here. I don't know why. So there would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
Are you talking about in the spaces next to the garbage? Or are you
Yes,
talking about
next
on
to the
street?
garbage.
Okay.
So we would, I guess technically we would split that section.
Okay. So 2 there.
Right, 2 there, and then I guess 5 up front, and the handicap space would be 8. I don't know if we can count the handicap one or not.
Okay. Did that all make sense, Clay?
Looks like you have more questions here.
These are my comments for Mike, actually.
Oh, okay.
Questions?
Yeah,
Have you received your license from the OLCC at this time, or you're pending?
permit.
So the very first step, when you look it up in the tree of things to do with the OLCC.
Let's see, and I haven't, because I want to be totally
the
objective
very
here.
first thing that they say in the life of your license, the very first thing before I can put the key in the door and let these folks in to check, it's to get this
Conditional use.
the zoning for the land use capability statement.
Okay.
Before I can do anything else, this has to come in.
Should you not be awarded that, do you have any other plans for this space?
Not at this time, no.
Okay.
Commissioner Poole, I've got a question. Parking is always an issue in these situations. And initially, I don't see a conflict, but what do you anticipate in terms of, you're going to have a certain number of employees, and you're going to, when we get to the retail portion of it, that's where I would have concerns about the parking issue, and then that dovetails into if people start blocking or getting careless on that side street, we ever have an incident, then the fire department can't get in there. So I'm just curious about what you're seeing in terms of at what I would call it full production or at full use. Are we going to get into a parking problem?
I can answer that to a degree because as the salon moves out, it's a salon that uses so many parking lots for way more spaces than we'll end up using. And they have 7 or 8 girls that work there, and they have people in and out all day long. Their use of parking spaces is huge, and as they move out, and then we open a retail, we won't even be using as many parking places as they're currently using.
So, Randy Roulette, so you're going to start out with retail, is that correct?
No, we're going to start out as a grow and
So
then
you're
move
gonna-
into retail. So and the grow doesn't really require hardly any parking whatsoever. I mean, 1 or 2 people, there, 1 or 2 cars. So it's
And
not a
realistically, it takes, it's going to take several months for the OLCC to approve our license. if, you know, if this goes well, the licenses would be submitted at the same time, and hopefully we would then get down the road in a few months, that space would become available, we then move in, we would then, you know, do our build out, and hopefully do them at the same time.
And OLCC has specific criteria and rules for each stage of that, correct?
Huge
So
one,
they
like
have
your
to
laundry list,
inspect
yeah.
your property and make sure that you have all the things for your growing operation.
Yes.
And the production is totally different because you have to have another whole different type of things for harvesting and extraction.
It's a completely different license type. So.
Right.
So the license you're trying to get now is just to grow, is that
Both.
correct?
Both. The license we're trying to get now is we're trying to get both. We're trying to get one for growing and one for retailing.
And to be clear, so what you're actually looking for right now is permission from us so that you can go to the OSLC and apply.
Yeah,
Right.
get permission from them afterward.
Right.
So.
And then they have their laundry list of things that we have to abide by. They send their inspectors out and they make sure that we're doing everything exactly right, the way that they've written it, in the OAR 84525, and go on from there.
And at what point were you thinking retail? Like, say, you got the necessary approvals and got your license and all
We'd
that?
probably be looking at probably anywhere from 90 to probably 90 days minimum before the inspector would get out there.
And does OLCC have, like, security criteria that you have?
Yes, there's a whole big section in the OAR 845 that talks about security cameras and backing up your data and your footage and all that stuff, panic buttons, alarm systems. Yeah, there's a whole section of it that talks about the security requirements.
Okay.
Libby Wentz. So my question is first for us. So after for you, I think, after the conditional, then it will, and after OLC, then it has to come back again to us.
No, this is a one-shot deal. The only repetitive action would be a business license, an annual business license. But
Okay.
this is a one-shot approval or denial.
Well,
But
then I guess my question is, I don't understand, and I don't know if this pertains to this at all, but logically, say you're growing it there and you'll be selling it there, but at some point it will be harvested and taken somewhere else and like done something to, so it
It's
becomes
just
a product?
it's just like a house plant, and if flower, you know, your plant grows and it will sprout a flower, and then that flower would come off and go into the other business where it's sold to a consumer.
Okay, so as far as hearing the processing and stuff, that you're saying there is no processing, and there is no drying, there is no extracting any of the oils or other stuff from it. It's just going to be cut it and put it in a dryer. I mean, I assume.
Yeah. So when the flower comes out, you take the flower off and you do let it sit to dry. So there's that, but that all happens there where it's grown. And then there's no extraction of anything, there's no processing, no chemicals, nothing like that. And off it goes to be sold to a consumer.
Okay, well that's good, because I mean one of my worries was that like there would be the chemical stuff to make to extract oils or do something like that. So it's just simply
mad scientist stuff
drying
that I
it
don't want
out
to get
and
into.
putting it out. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
You just want to grow it and pick the leaves, dry
Exactly.
them, and sell it. You don't plan on making teas or any food items.
No, that's.
And I'm sure that's regulated by the OLCC as well, isn't it?
It is.
You'd have to have a license to do other
That's a
products.
completely different license type with its own huge set of rules and things that you have to follow
Okay.
as well. We're not seeking those license types.
Okay.
And for informational purposes, to help everyone out, there's 4 different types of licenses
Right.
with OLCC. There's a wholesale license, which just is kind of a middleman in between bringing marijuana from a producer or several producers and then selling it to several retail shops and just acting as a middleman. There's a producer, which is licensed to grow, and then there's a retailer who's licensed to sell, and then you have the processor, and that's the stuff that you guys are talking about as far as when you're extracting or you're changing the flour into anything else at all, really.
Oil, food, tea.
Yeah, any foods, any oils, you can't do that unless you have a processor license, and we have absolutely zero interest in doing that at all.
Commissioner McCarty, didn't they just recently approve the OLCC, the home delivery service, as well?
It's old. They've had that
Well,
approved.
and it was not approved,
Yeah,
though.
it was approved and then not approved, and then I think it came back around.
Yeah,
but,
are you intending to do that as well?
I'm not, no.
Yeah. What they did is extend it.
It's too risky.
So that you
I don't want to
have more. It went from like like you could carry $160 worth, and then they made it so you can carry like $3,000 worth. So they changed the criteria on what you can do, but we have no interest in doing that either. No, we don't want to. We're not a delivery service. Very small grow operation. It's not going to be large. Very, very small. I mean, 540 square foot flower room is it. So.
Have you figured out the problem of I mean, I know they're working on this, but you're not able to go through banks at this time, is that correct?
That's not correct.
Okay.
There are a few local credit unions, like MAPS Credit Union in Salem, that is completely aware of what we do, and they're more than happy to give us accounts.
So you won't be having large sums of money held on site?
Right. There could be, but, just between the consumer giving it to me and it going to the bank.
Yeah, because you're going into such uncharted territory, whether there be crimes or concerns.
And the credit union, too, you pay quite a bit for that account every month because they make sure that you're within the anti-money laundering guidelines and all that good stuff. So
I'm sure as soon as the federal government figures out a way to get taxation, it'll be all legal. So.
For sure.
Okay,
Chair Roulette, if I may for a moment. Just backing up what the applicant is saying, they are correct. There are 4 types of licenses. They are pretty strictly regulated by the OLCC. They're also correct that the regulations regarding these sort of businesses, exceed hundreds of pages, and they are very specific about things such as security regulations in terms of where how many cameras per business, where they're focused, who's allowed in, where the public's allowed, where the public's not allowed, what you're allowed to do under each license. So the City of Gladstone did take a look at that when we wrote our own regulations.
Thank you.
I don't have any deep concerns about you producing the flower and drying and running a retail operation. And like any of us, you want to make a profit, you want your business to grow. There's things that'll probably change. We've got sort of a moving target here, and I understand we're making a decision based on today's rulings, today's reality. And this would be a question probably for Clay or for the legal counsel. My only concern would be that we get down the road and decide that we want to start the processing and extracting, and my question at that point would be, now we're changing what we were doing, and there's some concerns about the processing and what happens there. So I don't want to inhibit anything within reason, but by the same token, would it be reasonable to prohibit that in the future? Obviously they don't intend it now, but how can we?
I don't think we're allowed to prohibit it based on the recent measure that
right, but that particular aspect of it.
So that would be a change in use. So right now,
okay,
it's an industrial site, and they have licenses, or they're in the process of obtaining licenses, 2 of the 4 types of licenses, which are retail and grow. So I'm actually going to look at Clay, whether or not processing is even allowed in light industrial. And if they did, they'd have to come back for a change of use.
Yeah, and the ordinance that council passed, I happen to have a copy of it here, lists the type of activities which are allowed and includes marijuana processors. And it backs into as authorized by Oregon law, but it separates them out from producers and wholesalers and retailers. It's an additional category called processors.
Right.
Which to me that's the oils, the brownies, just the further processing beyond the preliminary drying.
Are they allowed in a zone? They are allowed in the
facility. This is the language from that was added to 17.24.
Okay.
Separate license type.
But they would have to come back for a change of use.
Right, that would be a change of use, kind of like people is going to a car lot. It's a different use. It's different enough because it's called out separately to where they would be coming back before you conditional use.
So you'd be considering the same criteria for a different use of the facility.
So what would trigger that? Coming back to planning commission if they say they want to.
If they got it, if they would like to start processing, as they pointed out, getting
so
the land.
Their business license would be specific when it says this is what you can do here. And it'll say right on there, so when OLCC looks at that, if they put an application into processing, then it would kick that back to us automatically.
I think he's about the license from us, as opposed to the license from us.
One of the other checks, though, too, is with the OLCC, they require a copy of the lease even from the landowner. That it has the license that we apply for has to say on there too. So even on that would have to say that we're going to be processing.
Yeah, and that's the OLCC would require local government sign up for this. It's a totally different license,
right.
And they'd require local government sign up, which in this case is me for the city, and that would do it. They'd also require a change of occupancy from the building department, which would require an autograph from the city. So, and they will not mess with, I mean, they're not just going to, in the dark of night, sneak in processing because they know they've got state licensing that they could lose and never get back.
Right.
We've already had a fire in Oregon City, and I'm not here to imply that you have any, I have no, I think you're totally legitimate, so my question is obviously just trying to get the crystal ball out and look down the road and circumvent
come back to bite you.
Yeah, or confusion about, in our minds or yours, about what will happen if things change a little bit. Thank you.
Thank you.
Do we have any more questions for the applicant? Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Now is the time for public testimony. Please approach the podium and state your name and address. Are you gonna do? He's not public testimony, right?
Well, he's here for the police department. We just kind of missed him earlier.
So we just have to make sure that we put that in the record.
Additional staff comments.
Okay.
Sergeant Wayne Lawrence, Gladstone Police. I'm only bringing this up because I hadn't heard it discussed earlier. And from a historical standpoint, when the whole medical marijuana thing started and we started getting some of those grows around town, we quite often dealt with a nuisance issue that I haven't heard discussed, and I don't know if it's part of your process tonight or a conditional process down the road in this whole piece. But we would get nuisance complaints about the odors from the production, the growing of the marijuana. So I think at least this needs to be a part of the discussion, since we do have the residents just to the north, whether this is actually a suitable use for the property or not, adjacent to the facility where it's going to be grown. The growing of it does create a lot of very offensive odors that some people can't stand, and it's very hard to contain them on the property. So part of the process, you have to be dealing with that, because those nuisance complaints are going to come to the police department.
How far out are those houses from?
Right across the street.
Like how many feet?
Clay?
Well, you got a 40-foot right-of-way, you've
Comes
got the
about
setback to the
85
building,
feet.
you've got, it'd be 100 feet. Close to 1,000, ballpark.
I just hadn't heard it brought up, and that isn't an actual real issue that is going to generate some issues down the road for us.
Well, Clay's really probably the one to answer for that, but the stuff that I've read about Clackamas County Unincorporated, and I've talked to the staff about changing the Gladstone Municipal Code to bring it up to date to deal with these, and odor issues, light issues, the hours of operation with the lights on the second floor, splash out the windows, that sort of thing, that they have to be off. All of that would be addressed in that, and in talking to Eric with the new, what do they call it, Jackie, the one that's coming up next,
City manager,
Grant.
city council. Oh, the TGM?
Yeah. He suggested that's where we address that stuff, because at least in the Clackamas County Unincorporated, in their ordinances, they address those very specifically. Everything goes on. And at the last meeting I was at the Clackamas County Planning Commission, odor was a huge issue.
Yeah, it is
they're
a huge
outdoor
issue.
grows.
They have to be dealt with at some
But
point
they're
in the
outdoor
process.
grows and they're huge. But at the indoor grow, based on what their ordinances already are, which is what I'm trying to get with Eric to include that in ours, or change ours to meet the current codes. That addresses the evacuation of that, the kind of filters they have to use, and how often they have to be replaced, all that
I'm
stuff.
just bringing up because the issue that's going to have to be dealt with at some point in this
Well,
process.
I'm glad you brought it up, because I couldn't because it's not one of the criteria we're looking at.
Right,
The
yeah.
the Gladstone, the new code language that was added in response to the vote and the ordinance and whatnot, though I got it backwards, but your language is very simple as far as it just says this is what's allowed and how it's allowed and where. It doesn't really break it down into Clackamas County is considered pretty much, we're way out there as far as the rules and whatnot. We're kind of ahead of the curve on that. We're a little bit proud of that, and I helped. But your code, there's nothing in there for us to use right now. This is going to, depending on your perspective and other things, well, it's going to smell one way or the other, whether you like it or not. How far you can consider it tonight is a question that maybe legal counsel here can answer. I don't really see it as part of your code, except in that third conditional use criterion as far as impacts.
No, I was talking about in the future.
Well,
Oh yeah, well, I mean, in the future, yes, you definitely want to get some language in here talking about odor and
I've actually proposed
ventilation
some
and
to
all
Eric.
that kind of stuff. That's a no-brainer. Yeah, you got to do that. But tonight, for this request, the best way to deal with it, well, the only way to deal with it is through those existing conditional use criteria. And one of the criterion kind of gets you there.
So the conditional use, and my understanding is that's where you put conditions. I mean, it's a conditional use, so that you can add conditions to that. You can say paint the building green.
Well, it still needs to be based on our code.
Right. Well, I suppose you could,
Really?
although you'd lose on it. But if this stuff, if you've ever been around, it has a very distinctive odor. If you get a whole bunch of them together, that odor is kind of magnified. The county deals with it through ventilation standards and buffering through distance. Your code does not provide for that, not directly.
Question for legal, so we can't put a condition on to match something in the county
It doesn't
code for-
directly get you there, but I think if you look at number 3, there's enough vagary that you can use it. I'm just trying to get it there.
So to answer your question, if you're going to condition, it has to be based on the Gladstone city code. So the fact that there's a condition in a county code isn't going to get us there. I do think we should let the applicant respond to that actual piece.
Sure.
But I also agree with Clay that, this is a conditional use application. One of the reasons why Gladstone put this as a conditional use application is to give yourselves a little bit more leeway in deciding whether or not the application meets all the criteria, and it is more of a subjective criteria than others. Again, what we talked about before is that, we need to make sure that it's based on substantial evidence. So if we have evidence that because of the odor does not meet the criteria, it's not suitable for the area, we can make some sort of finding. But I think we should let the applicant respond.
Sure.
I would like to say too that would kind of go against the whole
Thank you.
measure in a way, if we're saying that that type of business would always fail, right?
Well, a couple things. So, again, I'm going to let the applicant respond, but I believe that there is language in the OLCC that has to do with air ventilation. Cities and counties have also been choosing to supplement and more highly regulate ventilation standards for indoor grow operations. The smell issue, in my experience, has come up mostly with large outdoor grow operations, and it is something that the council should consider, or the planning commission and the city should consider in the future.
One last quick question before we proceed. I had thought about odor as an issue and considered this previously, and I don't think the operation is so large, and that we're not putting it in the middle of a residential neighborhood. Obviously, we're next to a rather noisy freeway. Not that it's part of the criteria, but I don't see quite the concern that would be generated with a large operation or some of the things I've seen out in the county. But my one concern, and you start getting into a health issue, is what about the health or the air or the quality of other tenants? I know you're thinking about that, And I know that there's a lot of ventilation codes, so when you speak, maybe we could address that. Thank you.
Now might be appropriate time if you have any rebuttal.
So, yeah, now is the time for rebuttal. Just say your names again before you speak.
Sure. Jeremy Lamachi.
Shane Hutchins.
As far as the, thank you, Sergeant Lawrence. The nuisance laws and language, I think it requires us to use a carbon filter. We are going to use carbon filters in our ventilation. You have to have that, and so that will eliminate that. Just so you.
It's something you can't do when you're outdoors. We're an outdoor
Right.
grower per se. They don't have the option of just getting rid of the smell. You can't do it. In an indoor grow, you actually have a controlled environment where you can do that, which is a really great benefit because then you're not impacting the surrounding area. The other piece of it is that we're venting out of the roof of this two-story building, and just the second floor alone at the top piece where we're venting is probably 17 to 20 feet tall in the middle, and then you have the whole bottom floor. So this stuff's shooting out like probably 30 feet in the air already. Heat rises. It's all hot air going up. You're not going to smell, you're going to smell the highway way more than you're going to smell this. I mean, the exhaust from the freeway is just right there. Is going to be way more overpowering than what
I think our
comes out.
canopy is somewhere in the range of 600 square feet. I mean, we're not growing a lot.
540 square foot flower room.
Yeah.
They don't really even smell until there's a 2 or 3 week period towards the end where they really, they flower up and they oil up, and so it starts to permeate that smell, and that's when you really start to know. When they're younger plants, it's more.
I think 4 or 5 times a year for a couple of weeks you'll get that.
So have you, seen an operation the size of the one that you guys are going to put in?
Yeah, I've participated in a medical grow down south. So, yeah, and the outdoor and some experience indoor as well.
How many plants?
This is a very small one. An indoor you don't really go by number of plants. You're going by lights, and so you're measuring by lights, so square feet. So
how many lights do you propose at this time?
It's going to be 10 running maximum.
Okay. Is there any possibility that your landlord, it says here that there's one pre-existing 14-inch duct.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any way that there might be an opportunity for another one?
There's 2.
Yeah,
there's 2?
There is another
you
duct
just
that
said
vents out.
one of pre-existing, so.
Yeah.
There's 2 pre-existing.
Yeah, there's one, the one coming out of the bathroom.
An 8-inch and a 14-inch.
Should there be a lot of complaints with your tenants in the building or even the close-by neighbors, do you have other alternatives to cut down or eradicate the smell if there's a heavy odor? Do you have any other tricks you can pull out of your hat to do that, or?
Filter, you won't need any more than that on a 540 square foot grow room. It won't.
Yeah.
I'm not worried
It'll
about it.
eliminate the smell.
And you are saying that is already in the plan to be using that?
Yeah.
Okay.
If I may, Chair Roulette, so there is some language in the Gladstone City Code that could be helpful. Clay included it. It's on page page 5, and it's GMC 17.70.0102, and I think that's what you're referring to, the additional conditions of approval. In permitting a new conditional use or alteration of an existing conditional use, the Planning Commission may impose, in addition to those standards and requirements expressly specified by this title and by the comprehensive plan, additional conditions which the PC considers are necessary to protect the best interests of the surrounding area or the city as a whole. This subsection goes on to identify examples of types of additional conditions that may be imposed. Planning staff suggests that if the proposal is approved, conditions added to specifically address buffering and otherwise protect properties to the north to the extent possible and reasonable. So if you wanted to create a condition based on that code language, there's your basis.
Okay.
So that say something like to not be a nuisance with odor required?
Well, any additional condition needs to be within reason and defensible. But there are state standards, and you mentioned carbon filtration. That's required anyway. Also mentioned was the relatively small size. This is an eensy little grow compared to the ones that I've seen. So small size, state required filtration. Can you think of anything else to add to that?
What is Douglas going to do?
Yeah, in the grow process, you fertilize your plants, and you have a number of chemicals that you use for that.
Incorrect.
Well, the fertilizer is a chemical.
We use, oh, I see what you're saying. We use all organic OMRI certified.
Okay,
stuff
so
for
we don't have to worry
everything
about waste into the wastewater system?
we have drain pans.
So you have
and
separators?
they, just like a house plant. So then they suck up that moisture. We don't water it too much so that we have to have that type of system.
You're not going to discharge into the...
Correct.
There is no discharge.
That was my question.
Yeah, yeah, no discharge.
Okay.
Just like a common house plant.
Yeah. We're not doing the
Yeah,
whole
it's a very small
aeroponic.
operation. Of some of
Not
that
doing the
stuff is outside
hydroponic
of
grow?
our outside of our scope.
Okay.
Questions?
Yeah, just, again, looking down the road, once you're doing retail, again, you're in a area with a lot of activity and the noise. Do you expect to be open past 9 o'clock at night? Are there any additional security
with the
thoughts? I
state-
mean, as far as your retail hours, what would you expect?
Yeah, the state has that lined out as well. I believe the hours they say you can be open as it's reasonable within regular business hours. Is it
10 o'clock is the latest.
I think
Yeah,
it's
I think
10,
it's
9 or
9 or
10. I
10,
think it's
yeah.
7 a.m. to 10 p.m. I think is the latest that we can be open, the earliest we can be open, and that's part of the OLCC guidelines.
Plus we don't want to be open all night anyway.
Yeah, and again, we're not talking about
Not
400
the kind of
spaces.
customer we want to draw is
Right.
midnight.
Yeah.
It's just not, that's not our draw either, so.
I think we're going to find the OLCC is stricter than anything we'd come up with.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
No, I know it is. My father owned a liquor store for 33 years, so.
Yeah, there you go. You know,
Yeah,
that-
oh,
you
I know,
know.
it's very strict.
Yeah.
Anything else?
Well, I thought I read it somewhere, but what hours would you propose if you, once you go ahead and implement, here we go, Monday through Saturday from 10 a.m. to 8 p.m., that's
Yes.
what you would probably operate in?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, that's my thought.
different hours. That's what
Right.
they're
Yeah,
saying.
but you can't exceed the 7 a.m. or to 10 p.m. time frame.
Only so many hours a day.
Yeah. You can only be open to the public from 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. according to the LCC. But I have no intention on trying to sell this type of product at 7 a.m. or 10 p.m. for that matter. So
10 a.m. to 8 p.m. works well for you, doesn't it?
yeah, it does.
Yeah, okay.
And I've checked hours on different, just keep my eyeball open to see what they're doing, and a lot of them by, 8 or 9 at night. I noticed 9 o'clock was a real common one, and, if you want to be open at 10 o'clock and have one person come in per hour or two
Right.
people,
Is
that's
it even worth it at that
you'd have
point?
the flexibility, but it wouldn't make sense.
The later the store is open, the more you're at risk for being robbed.
Yeah.
That's what my father found.
Yeah.
Of course, his store was over on 33rd and Killingsworth, so
Nice.
yeah, he was robbed. When he had it open later than 7 p.m., he had issues. So,
Something to think about.
yeah.
Questions?
Oh, I guess then for my own understanding. So basically, what you're saying, Clay, is that the permitting will be assuring that the building is structurally able to hold whatever weight bearing it needs to hold. Is that one of the things you had said?
Well, and that's a downstream impact. I'm going to use
And
that
that's downstream,
again.
so we don't
But
have to worry
that's-
about that at this point.
We will put an informational condition that they have to get, but they have to get them anyway.
We got that information, by the way, from Mitch. We know what the load bearing is. It's 300 pounds per square foot on the second floor. So we won't come anywhere near 300 pounds per square foot.
So that's not some, and that's down the line, but so that wouldn't be an issue. And what I understand is for the conditional use for us, we're thinking the odor and everything is already taken care of because of the LCC. Is that what you're saying?
Well,
and all of that stuff
frankly, I'm not
included?
sure what else you can do. At the county level, we buffer by distance. We let Mother Nature help
So
just by
could we
distance.
put in that there would have to be the carbon filter that they're going to do so that
Yeah, we're gonna
meet the
put in
standards.
condition
Meet
that
the
that they
standards.
meet
And-
OLCC, OHA, whoever's regulating odor.
Yeah, and I wouldn't recommend that we put a specific type,
No.
because if OLCC upgrades to a newer, better type, we
Yeah.
don't want to be out of date on it.
Right, so that's
they've got
going to
it
be addressed,
covered.
and the light's going to be addressed also. The fact that there aren't the grow lights, I assume, are not going to be like someone mentioned light coming out from the building, but that's not really an issue because that wouldn't happen because it's an enclosed building, correct?
In a flower room, you have to have 12 hours of complete darkness.
Right.
And so in order to get the darkness, you also have to block the light so it can't come out. So you're already in an enclosed room that doesn't let the light come out or in. And so I don't think the lighting is going to be.
And from the exterior of the building, you wouldn't be able to see any light ever.
And from a security perspective, we don't want to be advertising that we have this bright glow coming out of the second floor of the building, you know?
Yeah.
Okay, well, yeah, thank you. Those would be the concerns I'd have, and they're all addressed.
Yeah,
is
no, thank
what
you.
I want to
Yeah,
verify.
absolutely, thank you.
Great, thank you. You answered our questions, I think.
Could I just point something out? This was originally scheduled for last month, and poor Jeremy got delayed because we had, 4 flakes of snow. It was noticed properly, well in advance of that hearing. I had 2 phone calls. After it was postponed, I didn't need to, but I did full notice again, and received no comments from anybody. There is no one here this evening.
Yeah.
Frankly, I'm surprised, but there's
too.
been little interest in this either way. I'd just like to point that out for the record, that there is no opposition, there is no proponent testimony.
Yeah, and I would like to thank you, for the delay. Last month, when the news was reporting everything was shut down, TriMet was saying everything was shut down, Ashley wasn't sure she could make it here. We thought it would be better for everybody's safety to postpone it, and we appreciate you allowing for that.
No, I completely understand.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would add that it looks like our ordinance is working, because there's not a big opposition here. There haven't been a lot of big surprises, and given the limited number of places where the activity can occur, if there was no code and someone was going to do this in Gladstone, obviously that would be a place that would create the least amount of uproar. Even if there wasn't a code at all, you come down Portland Avenue by the high school, and this room is standing room only here. So I think that I just want to thank everybody that's helped put the code together and work through it, so that we're not preventing things, but we're watching out for the citizens, and we're still welcoming businesses that are going to bring income and jobs. So I appreciate your patience, and
thank you.
Sounds like it's been very, very time consuming to get this far.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. If there's no further testimony, I'll entertain a motion to either close the public hearing or continue it to a date certain. What is the pleasure of the commission?
Commissioner Smith, I recommend that we close the public hearing.
This is Malachi, I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None opposed. So the public hearing is closed. You can stay there, or you can go back. Now we're going to deliberate.
Oh.
And so we won't ask any more questions unless we open the hearing again, which I don't think we will need to. Thank you.
You don't need us for anything else?
Not at this
Thank you
point.
very much for your time and
We're just going to
answering all of our questions.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
So, what is the pleasure of the commission?
I mean, I personally feel like the OLCC is probably going to have very stringent requirements. Nothing we say is going to come close. I can't think of anything we would have to add that would be of value above and beyond what OLCC requires, personally.
I'd have to agree.
I agree too.
OLCC is extremely regulated. I know this is a new area for them, but I'm sure it'll be with the same.
Well, no, I agree with all that. The only thing I was saying is we will be looking in the future to change the Gladstone Municipal Code to bring it up to speed to catch up with where they are. But the OLCC, as far as I can tell, has done all the work.
Well, this is all brand new, of course, and so, I think, in my opinion, I think it's better to proceed with this the way it is than to put a bunch of conditions on something that we don't know yet what's going to happen. I think the LCC's pretty much got things handled, and I know that, if the police get a lot of complaints, we're just gonna have to figure out how to deal with that. It's a conditional use, so I'm sure there's something that we can do if there's a lot of police complaints.
Yeah.
Anyway,
And to assure our staff, you know, there is still the process when they go to get the business licenses and everything, you know, to make sure everything's safe and all that, it's still gonna have to happen. So it's not that stuff's being discarded, that will still happen, it's just after tonight.
so does anybody wanna make a motion?
I'd make a motion that we approve, file number Z0635-16-C.
Commissioner Smith, I second.
Question. Did you want me to add the general condition must satisfy OLCC regulations regarding odor, or are we just gonna leave that?
I think that they're gonna have to comply with OLCC across the board.
Correct.
And not just on odor. So.
Okay, so let's leave it okay.
The only thing we changed was the before the expiration thing.
Right, got that.
Will you call, for a vote? Call each commissioner's name and then we'll...
I'd be happy to. In no particular order, Commissioner McCarty,
Yes.
Commissioner Smith,
Yes.
Commissioner Malachi,
Yes.
Commissioner Poole,
Yes.
Commissioner Wentz,
Yes.
Chair Rowlett.
Yes.
Motion passes 6-0.
So I'm gonna hammer, and then what? And, the conditional use is approved.
Hey, Jeremy, what'll happen now is a decision will be written and it'll get signed at some point by Chair Rowlett here. There is an appeal period tacked onto the end of that, during which we can't issue any permits related to the use, just in case it gets appealed. It seems to me it's a 15-day appeal period in
So
Gladstone.
if I got this thing right about the appeal process, the only people that could appeal are the people in this room. So,
There's no standing, correct, Clay? Or Ashley?
I'm sorry, what was that?
There's no one in standing for an appeal.
Let's see, the record, who has participated. Has anybody submitted comments outside?
No.
No. And I do not believe, although I'm not 100% sure, that the council can't call something up when there's no appeal. So I can check the code on that.
That would be very unusual.
Yeah, so likely no appeal.
Yeah.
all right.
Quick note, just so Malachi doesn't have to keep mentioning it, we need to change that code reference regarding extensions.
Yeah.
Just to make it more clear, because it's a good idea for one, and I'm gonna get real tired of adding that all the time, because I keep forgetting.
Yep.
So
But he's
that's-
diligent about it.
So that's on the list.
Good.
Thank you.
Everybody on that one?
And
All
the
right.
next one's not for land use, it's actually from staff.
So the next one is, transportation growth management.
So I put that item on the agenda just for information to let you know that there's a grant funding opportunity for the city to apply for technical assistance for, guess what, code updates. And so it's a pre-application process that's due by March 10th, and it really just requires a summary of what we're applying for, and if we're invited to the full application, then I will be working with those commissioners and past commissioners that went through a process in the past of trying to get some code updates. Our comprehensive plan is from 1979. And as you know, we're going through a downtown revitalization plan update and a transportation system plan update that code recommendations are going to be forthcoming, but I think we first need to look at our comprehensive plan. So I'll keep you posted. We're going to apply through the pre-application process and hope that we can get some staffing assistance for code updates.
That'd be cool.
Excellent. Thank you.
You're welcome.
It's very much needed.
Do we, do we have someone that writes these, grant requests?
Yes, that would be your assistant city administrator.
Jackie,
In your
that.
free time.
I think, we're done. Let's have any discussion or business from the planning commission at this point.
I do actually. So Jackie?
Yes.
So, we recently did that ArcGIS training class, and I think it'd be really useful if maybe, Jim could do a short training class for the planning commission as a whole, get everybody up to speed on what it is and how to access it and how to use it, because I think it can be really helpful for some of the things coming before us.
Okay, that was...
I sat in that class, but I don't think anybody else here was on that,
I
right?
wasn't, no.
I mean, we could ask the Oregon City guy to come in and do it, but it would be a lot cheaper to have Jim do it.
We can put that on your agenda for the next meeting, if you'd like to do that.
That'd be okay.
I
Do you guys want any clarification what I'm talking about?
I think I know
what you're talking about.
the map, it's a map type of program.
Yeah, so Oregon City is maintaining it for us, and it's the thing that it has all the different layers, including like our storm drains or our fire hydrants and all that kind of stuff. Like, they're building all these layers for us that have as much of our city data as we can, including all the residences. You can use it for things like finding all the people who have to be notified within a certain range of a particular property, all that kind of stuff.
Wow.
And if we don't drive past what's on the agenda, we can look at it on this, correct?
Yeah, I mean, it's really new for us, but I think it'd be really useful for the planning commission members to at least know about it, know how to use it, and if they want to look up, like, how close is this to this, it can give you that kind of information.
I would like to learn about that.
So I think it'd be useful.
Yeah, that's an excellent suggestion.
Anybody have anything they want to discuss? Business?
I actually brought copies of two things. I get, after doing that thing online, when you become on the planning commission, does anybody else get these notices about, does anybody else get these? About different things where you can, for planning commissioners in the state of Oregon?
Yeah, I got invited to one, but I was out of the state, I was safe for one of them.
Okay.
Where they keep having these planning meetings for statewide planning meetings.
Yeah, and I didn't know if it's something that we're supposed to go to,
Really?
or...
I think we're encouraged to, but I've never been able to go.
Okay. Well, they're usually all day, 8:30 a.m. to 6:30, and...
Yeah, and
I just wanted to ask if anybody else had been receiving them.
Yeah, and they've been sending surveys, too, to get our, find out from us what we think is important.
I haven't gotten a survey yet, but I keep getting these
I
kinds
did that
of
one recently where they had a list of 30, 50 items and had me organize them in the order I thought was important for us. Everything from, historic districts to, cooperation with state officials.
You got it probably because you're vice chair.
I don't know. Maybe because I've been on here for a while.
Yeah.
I've been up here since, I think, 2014. So,
And they talk about credits that you can earn when you take these, like, I guess it's the American Planning Association. I didn't know if anybody else had gotten them.
Mm-hmm.
That's all I had.
I would just add that if it's like realtors, sometimes it's a requirement of a license or an engineering requirement that you do a certain amount of education, and I've been to a lot of those and got a lot of input, even though it's not really applying to a realtor's license or anything. It's great to know, and it also gives you insight on the people you're working with that are coming in the door that are realtors, that are developers. It gives you a better picture.
So is David still part of the picture, or?
You mean my boss? Yes, definitely.
He's your boss.
Yes. So he'll be usually attending the planning commission meetings.
Do you have something to say, Clay?
David's been arrested, but that is probably just a rumor.
Probably just a rumor.
Probably for protesting.
Yeah, he's probably protesting.
Very much propaganda.
Yeah.
There's nothing land use-wise scheduled for next month so far. There's another week that I suppose somebody could slip an application in, but I'm not expecting anything.
Okay, well, if that's the case, then I would work with Jim Wynot to maybe do some GIS during regular business hours when you...
Well, we could just push it to whenever the next official
Okay,
meeting is.
that's fine, whichever you want to do.
Okay.
Because it could probably be like a half-hour overview, just something I mean, it probably doesn't have to be that long, but I just want enough that they know how to access it and,
Right.
And it would
who to
be-
contact with help.
And it would be really helpful if you can do it like kind of online so we can see how he navigates to go to look at different things on the
Yeah,
computer.
it's pretty fascinating.
Yeah.
So, Clay will let me know, and I'll let you know, but it looks like there may not be a March meeting at this point.
Yeah, I'm not expecting.
Okay.
So I think it'd be a good idea to have those little training sessions like we did tonight, just come in a little bit early and, having a lot amount of time. And, I went to, when I was first on the commission, they sent us to Metro, and they had a training session at Metro about, some of the stuff that you just went over. You did a really good job, and you must love being an attorney because I could not do that. All the comprehensive stuff that you put in there, it's amazing what you're able to do, and the way you present it is really, you do a very good job.
Thanks. She did what was the thing you did where all the committees got together for the meeting rules and stuff? That was really good.
Yeah, that public thing we had
Yeah,
in
that was good.
November, that was really, it was well presented. You do a very good job.
Thank you.
I'll close by saying we'll tell your boss.
Thanks.
All right.
Any further business?
Anything else? And congratulations on the permanent position. That's
Oh,
great.
thank you. That seemed so long ago, but yeah.
It wasn't that long ago.
But Commissioner,
you.
well, Commissioner Poole, I'll wait
No,
till-
I'm very excited to be here.
No, I mean, with all this
Gladstone's happy to
workload
have.
you just got
Yeah.
dumped on you.
I have a
Gladstone's happy
motion to
have you.
make.
Thank you.
Commissioner Poole, I make a motion that we conclude the meeting.
I'll second.
Thank you.
All right.
Woohoo.
Those
Hit the
in
gavel,
favor?
man.
Those in favor? Yes.
Done.
You gotta do
Done.
it.